Yeah. Yeah, like there's all those articles coming out about it. I mean, there are like, I'm sure like there is still a lot of wealth being exchanged, but it's not equal, and it really depends on the family dynamic, right? I mean, I'm going through some similar stuff right now because I had to try and pull the family back together on my dad's side, because like it was it was nothing was going to happen otherwise. It's crazy. All right, we've started the stream and everything. I'm gonna switch to our cameras and turn our audio on in 3, 2. All right, and my camera's not there. Where's my camera gone? Oh no, what have I done? Where's my camera? Hello.
It's probably Discord
It's
still
like
controlling it. Do you
no,
want me
like
to?
well, because I've got a webcam and I've got my other camera going on. So what's
Oh,
going
okay.
on here?
Yeah.
Is it like what the? That is so strange. Hang on, I'm now a green blob. And I'm assuming Nvidia just decided to switch cameras on me again for no reason. It's so crazy. I had to like, oh no, shit, wrong one. Hey, all right, fixed it. Oh, I was like trying to get a video game working the other day, and it was that modern gaming situation where you spend 45 minutes fixing it and then 15 minutes playing it, and you go like, that was not worth it. That was
I've
not
seen
at all
some
worth
mad
it.
mods coming out for Skyrim now. No, sorry, no, it was what was the most recent one? Someone used Unreal Engine 5 to mod an old Lord of the Rings game.
Oh,
I just
really?
saw it on, yeah, I just saw it on like
Well,
Lad Bible or something.
I mean, someone made NPCs in Skyrim practically sentient, but you know.
Yeah, that's right. Good old AI.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that everything's working and we're sort of here, say hi to the stream, Mikey. We're just doing a little bit of an AI talk today. I'm sure there's going to be, as I put in the title there, there's going to be many tangents. I don't think we really our conversations are a straight line at all.
No.
Usually, but the key topic, because I think the main thing that we've both been sort of wrestling with on many different levels is sort of this new tech stuff and how it's going to influence a lot of things, how it's going to influence creativity going forward, how it's going to influence the world, the economy, religion, the family unit, everything. So that's sort of tangentially the direction of the conversation, and we'll just see how on track we really will be throughout. But yeah, I've been consuming a lot of content and podcasts around the topic of AI quite a lot. I've been keeping up with it because I think it's a pretty interesting deal right now, and we're all pretty familiar with the whole Silicon Valley influence on things and their approach on like just push forward, you know, move fast and break things as they say. But I feel like the stakes are a hell of a lot higher right now. So it's a pretty interesting topic. And finally, as of like the last few weeks and things like that, I've started to see more mainstream news sources actually start to take this seriously, which is really good. But yeah, I mean, we've both been playing with AI on a creation level with lots of different tools. And like I was talking with Jason the other night on stream while we were making some dope music, it is that weird thing of like being able to scale up creativity on an individual level, which is super interesting, because the debate is like, well, you should get real artists, real humans to do things. Then you're like, well, that's just not feasible economically. And so it's like this either exists with AI or it doesn't exist. Right. And so, like, probably introduce yourself a little bit. But a lot of what you're doing, I don't think would have been possible just by yourself if it weren't for some of these tools. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, probably about 2 years ago, when, like, I don't know, for those who don't know me, of course, very much have my hand in almost everything from children's illustrations and writing to electrical work, as we were just talking before.
Off camera.
But what I've yes, right. What I find is that now with these tools available to us, you can have a project that may have taken a team of like anywhere from just a dozen to a huge department, and one person can literally spin out even just a working prototype within days, and it is absolutely insane. Um,
Yeah.
now
But
you were
so what is it that you're doing right now? What is it
yeah,
that you're
that's
working
right.
on?
Sorry. Where do you begin? So imagine, if you will, the opportunity to take something as cool and not nerdy or dorky in any way as saber combat, so lightsaber combat, where people get armored up and literally battle each other, and then turning that into what is kind of like this weird
I'm putting it on
risk.
screen behind us. That video we did. I gotta duck down though.
So then, like, and then just simply turning that into this risk D&D version of itself. So you have an entire fictional universe. You join a team. You have this objectives where you've got to control outposts on a fictional planet. You have stories with characters that drive almost these cutscenes between controlling an outpost. You imagine your team. There's about maybe 6 to 12 years, and you rock up to the opposing team's side, and you say, right, we are going to conduct an assault on this outpost, and we're going to put forward 3 fighters who are going to fight your 3 fighters. And if our 3 fighters win, if they win 2 out of 3 battles, then we control your outpost. And these matches are scheduled across, something like 20 weeks. And when you control that outpost, if your team is successful and they control that outpost, then it triggers off a video, like a cutscene to any kind of game you might have seen before. Especially if you've achieved major objectives or you've unlocked like these kind of hidden artifacts that modify the saber combat game itself. And just again, so people are completely clear, like, this is real saber combat. This isn't like
Yeah, I just played that video behind us so
yeah.
that they could see kind of the idea. And yeah, like as we were kind of talking about it before, like you've sort of taken like not that that was the inspiration, but you like the most common example of it right now is that kind of Helldivers live world where every battle counts and everything sort of contributes to morphing the universe in game. And yeah, it's very much like you've taken like a LARP, almost D&D style. Like the story is developing as the games happen, but you've turned what is essentially like a martial arts club into this massively multiplayer. It's not online though; it's in real life game.
Yeah.
Where it's an MMR L RPG.
I think we had a bit of a chat about this a while ago about what you would call it, because like obviously, yeah, it's this not mixed martial arts, but like
It
it
kind of
is this.
is.
I mean, yeah, I suppose, yeah.
I
But
don't know that title though, and neither do you.
a mixed reality, but it's actual like real reality, right? So real reality with the if if augmented reality is coming at it from you've got a device on you and you're still able to engage in the physical world, this is saying let's engage in the physical world, but then have these like experience points and achievements and a kind of gamified aspect to it that is, that you would access online and connect with other people around the world. But you're right as well, like in the sense that it is a massive universe, and the
Mm.
reason why that is something that when I started exploring saber combat and all the crew like groups that are all around the world, from like Ludo Sport to Lightspeed Saber League and Saber Legion, I noticed they're all like it's a really new sport. It's only been around for like 15 years, and they're all already siloing off. Right, they're all breaking up into their little groups. And Ludo Sport is a good example where they were originally fencing masters in France, and the movements they don't even wear armor, right? Like these guys like are incredible control. They're using speed, they're striking, they have no armor on. And so I mean, God, my insurance would have an absolute heart attack with that. But then you see like the Saber Legion, these guys are all built up and they're making hard strikes, and there's no way that these two groups could compete against each other. Like there's just no way. But that means that there's this new novel sport where people are already siloed. They can't meet each other on their own terms. So I was thinking to myself, well, what if we could capture their effort and say, like, it doesn't matter if this group is doing Ludosport and this group's doing Saber Legion, if they all pledge allegiance to this fictional house, like this, whatever their house is for the year, right? So they're all their victories, all their matches could contribute to this global effort of this house controlling this universe. And yeah, the games themselves might still be contained on a world, right? You might still have the Ludosport guys only competing against Ludosport guys, but they can see the other crews all around the world and say, oh, well, those guys are Aori. It doesn't matter that they're Saber Legion, it's so cool, man. So we can like, back them and they back us. And then we've got this larger objective. So I think in that way, like it works. So
Yeah,
it's
like
really,
you've sort of created this multiplayer backend that can work for multiple styles, multiple types of sports. Because, like you said, like you only really need to know if there's a winner and a loser, right? And all those points then can go into the system and then can unlock part of the story and can progress things and then unlock, like you were saying, like items and things like that. But then it actually shapes the universe of the game across the board, and so it actually can make a difference. And like you said, you're sort of gamifying the whole thing. So you're giving everyone a reason to show up every week and stuff that they can check throughout the week, and then they can look forward to their next match and things like that. But it's in a, like you were saying too, like you can have the light armored or heavy armored class, so it facilitates different styles of play in a safe way where people can compete against each other across styles as well, which is something that I really want to see. And then yeah, it's a safe way to play and enjoy a sport, but it's physical, but it can still sort of capture the creatives and the people that are into cosplay and into sci-fi and tabletop and online games, right?
yeah, it really is taking this central point. I really like what you said there, of course, about mixed styles, and so you're right. Like, not to forget that Ludo Sport and all these other lightsaber groups have got their own styles, but even just within, like, if you looked at the Saber Legion, which is a really good example again, there's guys that are from a kendo background, and there's guys from a fencing background, there's guys from a Heba background, or Filipino stick fighting, and these things, like, it's kind of like back in the early days of UFC, right? Like
Mm.
when if you ever have you seen the videos from the 80s where you had like sumo wrestlers going up against karate guys?
No,
Like
that's
it is so cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
So it was literally mixed martial arts before until
Yeah.
the meta was established, and now everyone's just BJJ Muay Thai guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's it's so amazing.
Yeah, UFC needs a patch then, because yeah, like BJJ needs to get nerfed. It's boring to watch. Like
Yeah.
says the guy that just like broadcast an MMA fight, and I was like, God, the Muay Thai was way more fun to watch than the BJJ. There was no downtime, right?
It always feels like the moment it goes to a ground, it's like you know
They're
how
just
like
hugging.
you're making progress and then things go, oh, now it's slow and I gotta touch free, like
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
standing is nothing but like a standing knockout. That just
And
looks
just
so good.
just for those that are not watching, but just for clarification too, you are a third Dan black belt in multiple styles. I've got 3 black belts as well. We've tried a lot of this stuff. Like we have learned a lot of this stuff, and a bit of groundwork, some lockups and things like that. But majority of our training has been in Aikido and jiu-jitsu, but not in a sport regard. And I've never wanted to compete in a sport, and especially a lot of the stuff we do too is too dangerous. You can't sportify Aikido or anything like that. It is far too dangerous. You'll just end up with all your tendons ripped off, and it won't be a good thing. And that's something I've never been interested in, is the fighting side of things. I really enjoyed sort of the biomechanics and the just the fluid movement and the aspects of Aikido where you don't need to use power. It was all about technique in order to sort of use your opponent's power against them and things like that. So yeah, never had to use it, thank God. But it's it's a really interesting thing to learn. It's a really cool active way to sort of meet people and enjoy learning something new. And it's a full body learning experience. So it's really 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 cool. But yeah, so we're not just talking completely out of our asses either.
Yes, right.
I
I
mean,
had
we
an
are, but
argument
our
recently.
asses are educated.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I one of those stupid online debates recently. It's
Mhm.
just a Facebook thing. I don't know if you know, but I did not use Facebook for like so long, so many years, because I was right into it before, and then it's like, no, this is a waste. People just arguing, and I hate this. So I stopped it for like 3 or 4 years. I wasn't on any social media, and then getting back into starting to work for yourself and those kinds of things, really just you get dragged back into it. But I got into this argument, and it has to do with like there are hardliner BJJ guys out there, and like I get
Mm,
it. Like I actually have a lot of respect for all forms of martial arts. I love
mm,
them. And anybody who's seen understands that doesn't matter if it's judo, BJJ, all these different forms, they have a real complex art to them, right? But at
mm.
the end of the day, like you choose the styles that you do, and you find your space, what you like to work on, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I was going to talk about is the idea of competition and sport.
Mm.
So, like, yeah, that's right. So for the longest time, I didn't like sport. And I felt
Same.
that sport was something, especially if you're focusing on locks, on throws, breaks, you can't use them anyway, right? But what I found was with this kind of saber aspect. So before I had introduced any kind of light sparring, I was finding a lot of people were getting stuck in rigid structures. They would do the cutter or the kihon, and that was it, right? Like there would be nothing else. And they needed that level of variability, that unpredictability, where you've got someone who is they're mixing up the timing, or they're breaking your ability to get a hold on, and so you need to have that pressure testing. And then we were doing light sparring for a while, and I placed a little bit of heavy emphasis on it. But what I found was there was still the standard. Like, I'm not sure if you know much about how rates of participation in martial arts has changed since like the 70s and 80s. Before, once upon a time, martial arts stages were packed. You had the best films coming out of Hollywood. You had so much of a culture behind getting into whether it's karate or judo or whatever. Even people have commented that people that were fighting in karate tournaments and championships in the 80s were absolutely brutal. Like these guys had hard knockouts. And then you look at
Mm.
karate today, and it's just a guy's just hopping up and down, waiting to kick kind of thing, right? And
Yeah. And we experienced that in Japan as well, right? Like we literally traveled to Japan, all hopped up, thinking like this is going to be amazing. We do the traditional Aikido. They're going to be like, wow, this is cool. Like we do the same thing. We get there, and I mean, not to be this harsh, but it was kind of glorified aerobics in a
yeah,
way. Like it felt like watching the older Asian lady at the park doing Tai Chi type thing. And we are like, oh, like, I mean, there was some really cool stuff. And there was like, there was some really interesting stuff that we learned while we were there. But immediately when we were doing some of the techniques. And mind you, like every single person in that room was a black belt, and they were like, "Oh no, we don't do that. It's too dangerous." And that was, and this is stuff that that was directly taught. Like we have a direct line from Japan back in the 60s, and then our sensei learnt when he was a child, and then learnt most of his life, and then brought it to Australia, and then taught us. So it's a direct line, but 70 years difference goes from learning this stuff to keep these kids safe in the really rough areas of the UK, right? Like that was what it was for. It was, we need to toughen these kids up because they're out on the street and there are some dangerous people out there and this is a rough area, to going to Japan where I could just leave my camera on the street and it wouldn't get stolen at all. That time has changed those places, and you go to Japan now. Maybe Okinawa is still pretty legit. Like maybe there's still some really traditionalists in Okinawa, but yeah, the Aikido that we were taught is somehow more raw and purposeful than the stuff that's being taught over there today, which is just crazy.
Yeah, that really does have a lot to do with the way that Ushiba was evolving his art from an Aiki Jiu-Jitsu to which later become more of your contemporary Aikido, which was much more accessible to people. Like people don't realize that when Ushiba started, you had to be a black belt to train with him, and he
Mm.
had a reputation for being quite hard and for people getting hurt in the dojo. And this was still at a time as well when other rival martial arts clubs would come and knock on your door and then kind of challenge you to
Mm.
and beat the crap out of you too, by the way. So they had a reputation to maintain, and they did a good job. Like I mean, these were also some of the people that were in these circles, like Takeda, Sakaku Takeda, or Ken Shirabi. Obviously, these people were well known in their spaces. Sakaku Takeda himself like trained the Japanese police.
Mm.
Or even one of Sensei Ushiba's students, Tamiki, he goes on and trains the US military,
Yeah.
or goes a Shioda, like hard guys.
Well,
Um,
the guy that taught us,
yeah.
the guy that taught us when we were starting out, who's our sensei, has this giant gap in his resume that he's not allowed to tell anybody about,
Yeah.
right? And that
Yeah.
scared the crap out of us. And we're like, well, he was in the UK. Who would he be training that he's not allowed to talk about? Oh. And then we go do a demonstration, and Luke stands up against him to be his uke, and I see at least this much of his fingers disappear into Luke's neck. He just drops. And a surprising amount of ball grabs and groin strikes in his techniques as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's brutal.
Tony Smith was a scary guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that is crazy, right? Like there is the heritage of these styles and stuff is brutal.
Mm. So one of the, I guess, coming back full circle,
Mm.
one of the sad stories is that really martial arts has like become nothing but a business, right? Like it's a glorified business, and you see that in these huge franchises, which
Mm.
they create a system where students come in, they feel good about themselves, they have your typical dopamine hits, right? So you'll have to do your grading intervals at such short periods that people stick it out for the next belt, and then they kind of end up with a really cookie cut style and system that has no real bearing or application. Just make sure it's just a physical fitness thing. That's it.
Mm. And then they get
Um,
overconfident and get beat up in the streets.
that's right. That's right. And but at the same token, while you've got these McDojos, you've also got then other groups that are becoming like the hardliners. So MMA, UFC, like your BJJ, all that stuff. But
Muay
of
Thai.
course, what that does is it masks the question, well, where's the tradition aspects to these, and for them,
Mm.
it's about what works. It's the pragmatics, right? Like if this
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
work, why would we use it? Because we're
It's like
looking at
that
the
Krav
science.
Maga type stuff as well, where that's supposed to
Yeah,
be like an amalgamation of everything that works.
yeah. But there is something in the student-teacher relationship as well that's actually really nice. Like if you find an instructor that can really connect to you, then you're learning not just a martial art, you're also learning a culture, you're learning a philosophy, you're learning a way of seeing the world
Sometimes
that
you're just learning
itself.
a cult.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. You can definitely get lost in cults, and I don't recommend that. Please recognize when you're being taken advantage of.
Oh my god, yeah.
Um, but there is this, if you divorce the physical techniques from the general culture that surrounds the person you're learning from, you're failing to see that that person also picked up that culture from so and so, and they picked up that from so and so, and there's a lineage there of the other signifiers or ways of being and seeing the world that has come with that, right? Like, sure, there are other things involved with that, but a good example is the concept of Zanshin. So Zanshin is not a technique; it's a mode of perception of seeing your opponents and having a sense of intentionality towards the world, right? Like you have this focus. So I think my partner's putting up some picture frames. You have this focus that really changes your body to the sense that you are grounded, you're confident, you're ready, you're strong, you're alert, you're grounded in terms of your footwork and movement. And that's something that emerges out of that higher level of stuff. It's not the techniques that is taught to you, it's something else that you pick up slowly through, yes, through emulation by what you've observed, but only after, I guess, when you've made almost the synapses, right? When you've made the grooves, when you've made
Mm.
the mapping out, then you go, oh, that's why he was so confident. That's why he could move the way he did and why he was so chilled and relaxed. Because actually, he's managed to get to that level where now it's just Zanshin. He's just like, oh, yeah, here it is, bang, bang, bang. Like there's no thought in it. And I think that's really fascinating. So,
Is that like
um,
10,000 hours like flow
yeah.
state stuff, right?
Yeah, totally, totally, and so it's there are other things other than just techniques that get lost, and there's also the jokes too. Like there's the anecdotes. You know, I love reading the anecdotes of the students that surrounded Ushiba and how they talked. Oh, you know, he used to do this, and this was really weird, and he did that. Like Sensei Carl was the same. Like he
Yeah.
talks all about Bleakman, the silly stuff Bleakman would do, and
Mm.
that's again, that's a part of that's almost like an authenticity to say that you
Mm.
weren't just watching videos on YouTube and learning your martial arts. You actually spent time with this person and you got grounded in their understanding of the world. And that also has carried through with your techniques too. So and I think there's something special about that. And so
And
what I
it,
wanted
yeah,
to
it is that
do,
like, yeah, passing on, right?
yeah, absolutely. That also grounds you in a mythos about the world, about the techniques, about the legitimacy and the lineage, right? Like, so there's going to be things that Kensho Abe did that got picked up by Bleakman, they got picked up by Tony Smith, and then eventually and it might just be those subtlest expressions. I'll give
Mm.
you another example, right? So I'm
Keep
of
talking.
German heritage. My family immigrated to South Australia in the 1850s, and after the successive world wars, eventually over time they stopped speaking German and they just start completely speaking English. So my mum never spoke German, my grandparents never spoke German, but there were these old expressions of like, you know, saying something like Gesundheit or
Mm.
Dankeschön, you know, like that kind of get warped through the typical Barossa Deutsch, but they are these trace elements that are tiny little things that get carried over just by parent learning, child learning from parent, and so on and so forth,
Mm.
until you go back to when they actually were speaking German.
Like
So,
traditional
but this,
like children's songs and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there are other things as well, like, so there's been great studies done on how parents around the world discipline or nurture, you know, their children, how these things look, you know, in terms of do they emphasize independence, do they emphasize more dependency on the family, what are the things that they value, right? And while in Australia we like to think of, I mean, we tell ourselves we're a multicultural society because we really are, but we still have some level of thinking that, you know, we have a lot more in common than what we would think. What we tend to find is that there's these little subtle differences within families that you don't discover until you spend enough time with somebody else and go, why the hell do they look at the world that way? Like, you know, you've got a significant other that after a few years you start to unpack them and work out, oh, they kind of see the world in this way, or they tend to do this. That's a bit odd. I've never thought about that, right? Like,
Mm.
And so it's just these, you discover these things about them, but you find out that those are behaviors that were contained within that family that probably has continued on from so many generations. I don't know if you've got any experiences like that.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, like because my family came over from Scotland, and then what was funny is that they moved over to Whyalla, with like a group of Scots, right? Like they all came over on the same boat, and they just never stopped hanging out. So they never lost their accent.
That's awesome.
They're all just basically like extended family now. Like we literally just call them uncle, aunt, even though there's absolutely no relation whatsoever, apart from the fact that they're just in the same place and they've come from the same place or whatever. And there's, like again, same thing, like traditional songs and little sayings and things like that that have been held over, right? And then the funny thing is when a family member does come over, you think they had a Scottish accent before. Bloody hell, they have a Scottish accent when a family member comes over. It all comes flooding back, and it lasts like 3 weeks after the person leaves too. I'll just be like, all right, I'll see you in 3 weeks when I can understand you again.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But yeah, like there is all of those little things. And like, yeah, like whether it's conscious or not, you're right. Like they are passing on a worldview. They are passing on ways to deal with things and handle things and ways to treat people, and that sort of, and like I guess like religion will be a very similar thing as well, right? Like that's all part of that, and whether you believe or not. Quite a lot of the times, the main teachings are on the moral level rather than it doesn't. It's not all spiritual. It's not all you know uh dogma and the stories of it, right? Most of it is trying to teach family values and outlook and how to treat other people and things like that.
Yeah, the ethics versus the metaphysic. Yeah, and that's interesting because again, you can see how that comes back to that martial arts in the sense of those who divorce martial arts from tradition, and they say we only want what's of value, what's going to do us well, and so then they're quite happy to be disconnected from that. They would even make the case, oh, you're just kind of following a cult leader, a personality, cult of personality aspect. But then, like, you could make the same case about families. Like, do you
Mm,
reject everything that your family, all the traditions, the mannerisms, the ways of seeing the world, and say, oh, well, no, this world's different, right? This world requires new solutions, and this stuff doesn't really do me anything. I'm not interested in having it. I'm just going to try and discover my own thing and divorce all of that from that? Or do you say, look, maybe I'm embedded in something much bigger than myself? Yeah, it's just interesting how we, and I don't think there's any one is better than the other. I
mm,
think that people have to make decisions based on what is actually to some degree pragmatic for them, right? Like they will
yeah.
negotiate with the world, and sometimes the world won't let you make the decisions you want to make.
Mm.
Um,
And I feel like, yeah, and that's the stuff I've seen before too, where also like people feel like that's been taken away from them when they've been taken out of a culture, right? Or like, they have those family traditions, but they were also, that been now that they've immigrated to a new country or something like that, they feel like they're sort of left out and somewhere in the middle. Like a lot of people experience that. And yeah, and I think like sort of where you were heading with that is that family is an extension of that, and family has changed a lot now, and which is funny because it all sort of ties into current politics, right? Which is like we're in the middle of a housing crisis, and that's because part of that reason also is because we only have one generation under one roof in Australia and Western countries now, and so the average our household is like between 2 to 5 people or whatever. We're having fewer kids. We're working more and we're living by ourselves, and so that does disrupt those things quite a lot. Whereas it used to be more of a village raising a child kind of scenario, and you would have the family all together and a lot more, especially because there was more kids, right? So you needed more support, and that kept everybody together.
mm, yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely.
I think there's something lost there for sure.
Yeah, there's the interesting thing about housing. that is that aspect of intergenerational wealth and how that's passed on and how you make decisions about growing your investment portfolio, right? Like,
Mm.
if you were to buy a house, right? Um,
That's never going to
if you
happen.
remember growing up, like I remember, no, it's never gonna happen, right? But like, this idea of when you get ready to retire, you downsize. I
Mm.
remember that getting thrown around so much, but it has to be the worst investment decision you could possibly do. Because ideally, what you want to be doing is using the equity in your house and then borrowing against it and then building your portfolio, right? Uh, Yeah, like so but on that subject, I was having to think about this as well. In the sense that if you can imagine your family being Scottish, come here, found you know people from the same area, and were able to settle down and still maintain a lot of the cultural roots. There is this kind of situatedness, right? Like your family bought houses. They at 21, if someone had gotten married, they would have probably put some money together to help them get a deposit or get them into work. And there was this really a community dependent on each other, where very slowly, if you knew someone, they could get you into work, and you could build and grow from buying a house and leveling up that way. But the moment that economics changed, like, oh, all of a sudden, oh no, South Australia is going to stop producing this particular part. We're going to ship the work over to the other states or out of the country. Then all of a sudden, those skilled people go, well, we need to follow work, so we're going to have to sell this house and we're going to have to go, right? But by
Mm.
selling that house, they also have to, so A, they lose the equity in it, or whatever equity they take. They're probably going to have to put that into buying another house in the move itself. And they're probably going to have to buy a house in an area that's probably more densely populated. So they're
Mm.
not going to get the value of house anymore. And then, of course, what that means is the less equity they have, the less they built up, the less they're able to use for future generations, right? And in
Mm.
fact, the more that the family splinters away and doesn't have the ability to support each other by providing maybe interest-free loans, or again,
Mm.
the opportunity to borrow against mum and dad's house for your own, then you've lost that safety net, which makes it more difficult for you to accumulate that intergenerational wealth.
That's
And
exactly what I'm
so,
trying to undo right now.
yeah,
Is that
same.
yeah, so like my grandmother is 90, and that's a very similar situation that I'm looking at. I'm looking at this life, I'm looking at this potential legacy that is being absolutely squandered because the family isn't together. They're scattered across states and they don't really get along that well. And you've got children and grandchildren under that now, so great grandchildren, and they're splintered off. There's no connection there, and yeah, you've got, you know, whether someone's got their hand out or not, it's that concept of like, no, this should be building something. We should be building something that will be there when it's needed, and it should grow, and it should be, yeah, it should be a family thing, and like we should be a team. And that's that thing that it's just very difficult to see why that's that's not the case, and like what happened. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And so that's like a, yeah, that's what I'm gripping with right now in a similar way. Like the other side of my family are very supportive of each other, and like my uncles would my one of my uncles bought his brother's other home, and then is renting it out to my cousins and things like that. So there is a lot of support on that side. It's not real wealth, but it's, everyone's getting by. But the problem with me, like, I mean, I would probably be way better off if I was still in Wyler, but
Mm,
in terms of work, there was nothing there for me.
mm,
And you're here too, so I'm assuming there was, you were done as well, right? So it is
mm,
it's an interesting thing because, yeah, like young people get drained out of these towns because there's nothing for them. They don't see a future there. They come to the city on their own, spend tens of thousands of dollars a year in rent. Like, I mean, that's what it was when I moved here. It's worse now.
Mm.
And that money is just lost, and the support is gone. The lucky ones, you know, I've had friends where their parents would buy a house where their kid was doing uni, and then like that would be where it all starts from there. But yeah, it's just, and it's, but also like I sort of mentioned it before, like we're on camera. The hard part is being single in that
Mm.
world, right?
Mm.
It is so much more difficult to do all this shit on your own.
Yep.
It's almost impossible now. Like it is insane.
Yeah.
And you're forced into getting a job rather than developing a career, and that's the thing that I really just find such a shame, that there is so much we're missing out on because people are just on that treadmill,
Yep.
and there's no
Mm.
way off.
And I think we talked previously about this idea of there being this kind of difference between an exchange mindset and a communal mindset. And
Mm,
really, you see this a lot when somebody dies, and then all of a sudden an estate is brought up, and everybody is straight away, well, what about me? And what do I
mm,
get? Right? This is this like you will do worse by breaking up an estate and squandering it all into little bits rather than using it as equity to borrow against for future growth.
mm,
So, it's in a family's interest to say, hey, look,
literally.
rather than blow it and spend it all and break it up, what if who's going to start a business soon? Who
Mm.
wants to buy a house soon? Who wants to start an investment property? Let's look at what we can do.
I'm gonna
Assess the risk
send
as
this
a group.
recording to my family, by the
Yeah.
way.
If everybody says, it's like a zero sum game, right?
Mm,
If
of course
there's
it is.
one person who goes, oh, I'm just going to take mine and get out, it falls apart. But if everybody goes, look, if we all just keep together and work towards that
Did you
growth
also
mindset.
watch that YouTube video on game theory the other day?
No, I didn't. Sorry, can you more than welcome to tell us? Yep.
No, but that was the thing. They did this experiment on game theory, and it was and it was like, it's like literally like a win loss. Like it's like the prisoner dilemma, right? Like if you cooperate, you get more coins than if you defect. But if one person defects and the other one cooperates, then you can still get a coin, right? And it was literally all of the programs that were nice, forgiving, and collaborative that won. And that was the best way to profit in a game theory, is to collaborate and to forgive, but also not to be a pushover.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like
Yeah.
people are just breaking up these estates, and like I don't know. In a way, like I'm all for more people not being part of the problem.
Yeah.
And like what's the thing? Like I heard this recently where it's like real wealth only lasts 3 generations, because the first one earns it, the second one saw what it was like to earn it, and the third one squanders it, and then it's gone, and the cycle starts again. And then I guess the variation of that is, what is it? Strong men make good times.
Yeah. Good times make weak men. Yeah, that's right.
Weak men
And so
make
that
bad
means
times.
you are literally then at the beginning of the cycle, right? You're looking to start again, build it, and you're working hard to do that. In fact, I'm right there with you. We've just established the family trust, so we've got the Von Rieben family
As
trust
of I,
now,
that was
and
more of a business thing than a family thing. But
well,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. It sounds noble, but yes, it's all about tax dodging, isn't it?
yeah. No, it's tax
Uh,
optimization.
that's what my chartered accountant keeps telling me.
Yeah. For sure. And but it is interesting, right? Yeah, I just, yeah, it's like the thing of like, you gotta, like, whenever you can, you got to look to the future, and you got to reserve something, and you got to make sure that that stability can be passed down, right? And it's, I don't know, man, it's looking bleak. It's looking real bleak.
Now don't get me wrong. When I bring this up, there's always a caveat. I'm not one to think that somehow these super elite rich people are wonderful and great people. I don't think that.
Mhm.
Um, but a conversation came up recently about whether it is a fairer system to, take, like, say, Elon Musk's wealth and just break it up, so that every single person, maybe in Elon Musk's companies, all have an equal share, or everyone across the world, all money could be evenly distributed. And I thought of that myself, and I was thinking about it, and I come to the conclusion that in many ways there's actually and that's obviously the extreme. So you've got two extremes here. You've got one where you've got this huge concentration of wealth, and then you've got this other one where everything is equally distributed. Now, just like the estate that gets broken up, and each person gets their allotment, gets squandered, and eventually gets spent on their individual needs. If they had collectively worked together, they could have put it towards a great investment and maybe had dividends from that investment, right? So similar thing is actually taking place in many ways with Elon Musk, where if Elon Musk didn't have the billions of dollars that he has, nobody could do things like SpaceX or Neuralink or like any of these major global changing programs. If all that money had been distributed evenly, there's no one person that would have the power to do these huge engineering feats. And obviously, there's always the extreme to that, because you can get someone who hoards wealth and then doesn't do that either, right? Like, just because they have the wealth doesn't mean they were going to do it.
I
But
mean, the argument against that is that money shouldn't, that no one should be able to amass that amount of money, and that it should stay with the state in order to improve things. And at a certain point, capital then disrupts democracy. That's the other aspect of it. Like, if anyone was paying attention, you could probably listen. You could probably work out which of the 4 podcasts I just listened to.
I do agree to an extent, in the sense that capitalism and lobbying and money disrupts democracy, absolutely.
But if we close that loophole, then sure, go make a bunch of money and move us to Mars. Go for it.
But I've also come to doubt that democracy has the ability to do the things it promises either. I don't see people voting even equally as having the ability to.
That's because of another billionaire who originates from this very city. The only danger to billionaires is an informed electorate. So if you just don't allow the electorate to be informed, then they're not a danger.
And this will sound elitist, right? But I mean, it is something that we widely accept, that we all have different capacities. Not all of us are thinkers. Not all of us want to think. Some of us are just stressed and want to get through the life, get through day-to-day activities. And we don't have, like, how many times do we defer to somebody else for political thinking?
That's exactly where they want us.
But it seems
they
to be
want
the very
us just
model of
they
reality.
just want us to come home from work, be too tired to think about anything, consume the same 4 channels, consume, watch my ad, buy my shit, so that you need to work. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Now, again, there's this assumption, though, that if we simply economically unshackled every single person, that every single person would become what is an old term, which is it's the enlightened man, the liberal thinker, the person who is versed in all spheres, from like the Isaac Newtons, right? Like someone who's done physics and astronomy and chemistry and everything.
There's a word, yeah, like similar to like multifaceted. Whatever,
Renaissance man, I think it was.
Yeah, Renaissance man, yeah.
It's an old classic term.
Or yeah, there is a word.
But actually, it turns out we are much better if we specialize in something and become complete. I'm going to use the term.
That's how we got here.
But we just zone onto one thing and just blink out everything, and like almost have no social life, and then we create something that is really fascinating. Like I got no idea.
Is it
about
multi-dyed it? Is that the word?
But
there's
like
a freaking word, like a dyed or something. I think it's called.
Yeah, like a polyglot's like someone who speaks multiple languages. But it's a polymath. Is that the one?
Polymath is also a word. Yeah. I don't know what it means, but it is a word. Polymath. No, yeah. There's like person of knowledge, of wide knowledge or learning. Yeah. He died. Yeah. It is interesting for sure. Like, and that was like, I'm going to take us on a little tangent. That was sort of the promise of the internet when we were kids. Do you know what I mean? Like the world's knowledge is in you. It was on the computer. Now it's in your pocket, but so is the world's misinformation now, and that's sort of that annoying the cost of doing business, right? That's what ruined it. But the dream was that productivity would get so vast that the average worker would have to work less, and then the world is your oyster, and the world's knowledge is available to you at the click of a button. And it never really paid off that way, because anything that was saved was just went up the chain, right? And that's the issue that we're in right now. Whereas it doesn't matter how much progress is involved, it doesn't matter how much we can advance society. Currently, all of that money is just being sucked up to the top.
In many ways, if you think about what people were able to achieve in the fin de siècle, like the turn of the century, from incredible writers, for example, or like take Edgar Allan Poe or Nikola Tesla, and their achievements, and you ask yourself, well, how much money did they actually have, or what level of living standards did they have to be able to achieve those things? And you work out they actually didn't have that. They had probably a poorer living standard than what we have now. Now, I'm not saying that therefore we're great. What I am saying is that we are poor, but we still have a level of a risk-free life. Like nobody's chasing us, banging on the door, ready to stab us. For the most part, we can take some risks, and we can explore to create something that we might not have ever been able to do before. Like if you're living in, say, for example, Ethiopia or like a Zimbabwe or something like that, right? Like a really areas where you do have to face violence every day, and it's just living is a struggle. But like you could literally today, if you had nothing on you, if you were homeless, you could go down to a library and you could access books, right? You could take access books. You could download for free Mary Shelley's Frankenstein if you wanted to. Actually, just download that the other day just so I could read to my little baby boy while he was sleeping, because he was grizzling all night. But he likes the sound of my voice when I read, so that's good. But like the question is, you have the ability to do it, but do you have the desire to do it, right? Do you have the motivation to do it? And that's something different, because you can have access to certain things, but you might not have the motivation or desire to do it. And we might be overworked, might just don't have the time of the day. Fair enough. But like at the same time, if you're motivated, you can also find the time. Yeah. Like you might be going on the bus to work, and you've got 30 minutes to read. And you might choose in that 30 minutes to scroll Facebook and see what the latest updates are. Or you might go, you know what, I'm going to just dedicate 30 minutes of reading.
The anecdote I have here is that I think the salvation of that internet dream that we once had is the podcast. There's a podcast called, I think it's called Philosophize This, and it's literally a guy who worked in a warehouse and just had his earphones in at work every day for years and years and years and years, and just listened to pretty much every philosophy book that he could get his hands on, and then started a philosophy podcast. And eventually the podcast got so big that he could quit his job. And I'm like, that is the perfect analogy for sort of that, like what you're talking about now, where it's like, if you have the get up and go to get up and get the fuck off this train, then I feel like that's the thing. And I was talking about this with Jason, the same thing. Like you can literally change your brain by changing your input, right? Like you even mentioned the other day that I'm like quite good at naming things. That was one of my biggest weaknesses, and I was terrible at like punny humor. I didn't get it. I wasn't good at it. And then in a similar way to the Philosophize This guy, is that I film sports for a living, and it's very easy to do and does not take much brain power. And so I listened to podcasts while filming sports for about 6 years, and listened to 1,000 hours of Dan Harmon and his friends doing improv comedy and freestyle rap. And it literally changed my brain chemistry as a la training an AI and a neural network to be able to do those things. And now it's like my brain just makes those connections instantly. It's crazy. But that was my thing, was that, Yeah, like because a lot of the podcasts I listen to, like they are the authors of the book that have a and they're talking about the topics in their book, and it's compressed down to 2 hours, and you can get the meaning and sentiment behind it. And if you need more information, then you can go read the book. But yeah, the amount of knowledge that I've downloaded in the past 15 years or maybe 12 years from podcasts is insane. I looked up my stats once, and it was about so this would have been like 5 years ago. I looked up my stats on one of my podcast app, and my podcast consumption numbers were not in hours, and they were not in days, and they were not in weeks.
Hmm.
It was about 3 months of podcasts that I had consumed. That's an insane amount of information. And it's just direct download. And that's because I'm a very verbal learner, and I usually learn by discussing things and talking about things. But I have downloaded so much knowledge into my head. And sometimes when you talk to people, you realize that the unfortunate side of like them needing to have a 9 to 5 and raise a family and things like that. It your you sort of your personhood kind of gets pieced down into, I have this function, and between these hours I am here to do this function, and I'm here to provide, and then I go home, and then I need to unwind, and I need to decompress, because it's a hard life. That you do see that difference in it's not, yeah, like I don't know. There is that kind of dumbing down in a way that that is really unfortunate. And my camera's gone again. What is going on? But yeah,
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, like I hear exactly what you're saying. If you have like the brain is an amazing thing, neuroplasticity is incredible, and we are very much like large language models. So if you have change your input, if you focus on things that are going to be constructive and allow you to build your life, then that's exactly what you're going to see. And a nice, good, simple analogy of that again is like very simple. When I wanted to go buy my car, it's just a cheap, affordable car. I can get my entire family, my soccer team, places. I was looking everywhere for a Nissan Elgrand, and when I bought it, all I could see was Nissan Elgrands everywhere. And so, likewise, if you are motivated to look at a certain thing, if it's all about philosophy, or if it's all about something, all of a sudden your brain kicks into gear and it says, right, well, I'm going to start giving you what it is that you're after, right? I'm going to start making it easier for you to find these things because that's what you've prioritized. So certainly, make that priority towards something that's going to build your life, and then you'll find your brain already works with you to make that happen. How are we going? Oh, it sounds like your mic might still be out. That's all right. Yeah. So another one as well on that point, though, and I think that this is an important distinction because I do work with people who struggle from an attentional perspective or behavioral perspective, and that is that while we can certainly be motivated towards improving ourselves, some of us still also have differences, I'll say, in cognitive capacity. And I think a good analogy of this is there are some people who are driving around with a brain like a Lamborghini. They've got this souped up superpower brain that can literally, like, they can hold 9 things in their mind in terms of working memory, superior working memory, and can think of anything. But then there are others who, you know, that actually it can be a huge task for them. You might only be driving a Datsun 200 or something like that. But saying that, even if you accept that people have different capacities cognitively, you can still also look to
There we go.
improve the performance of your motor. Ah, there you go. You're back. That's
Yeah,
good. So,
yeah.
I was just saying,
Yeah, I'm totally following.
like,
Oh, I could hear you the whole time. I'm following.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, it is interesting. Like we are gifted with different engines, as you were saying, for sure. And that's where it's like all this neurodivergent stuff is coming out, which I find really interesting as well, because we're actually able to harness some of these differences that are that are you know on the level of superpowers in some ways, right? And so I like that. some people can thrive if they then know the techniques and stuff that are used to sort of cope with those abilities, is really interesting. But yeah, I think the topic you were trying to get to before was specializing over general
That's right.
skills and being too broad and things like that.
So just like again, if you were to make it so that we had money equally distributed everywhere, or you freed people of their economic shackles, and you said, right, go off into the world, become a Renaissance person, and study everything, then ironically they become time poor, right? Because if you say no, you shouldn't depend on anybody to inform your thinking in any way. You should make sure you think only for yourself on every single subject matter. Then that person has to distribute the time that they have across all these different activities, and they'll never really excel to beyond a certain level. They may become quite knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than the common person, but at the same time, that time is a limited resource. So,
Mm,
in many ways, you could make the case that a person who can specialize on one thing can produce a product that is going to have a huge impact on society than someone who is kind of almost squandered a lot of their time across heaps of many things and never really has the ability to specialize in any one thing. And this the same is then applied. So obviously, time is money, money is time. The same thing happens with money. When money is concentrated in the hands of I guess, a benevolent force, we can make some incredible outcomes from that and produce things. Like I think the actual Neuralink device that Elon Musk had to get engineers to make, which didn't exist beforehand, required huge novel solutions in order to be able to make it work and create it. So it was something that didn't exist before. The ability to insert these very, very fine micron wide, thin gold threads into the brain didn't exist before. The technology to insert it didn't exist, and then they've gone and created that. So that's something that's interesting, I think.
I mean, there are multiple companies working on BCIs, and it's always the case that invention usually happens in parallel and things like that. But yeah, like unfortunately, there's the school's out on whether he is a benevolent force or not.
Probably.
He is a productive and very profitable force for sure.
Yeah.
It is hard. Like I still sort of believe that we could do more good if the money was in democratic hands as opposed to capitalist ones. I feel like almost no one gets to the level of billionaire without some kind of exploitation, which is difficult. Because I just feel like once you're profitable enough, you should just be paying people more and what have you. Yeah, it's interesting. Like we're in a very weird spot right now where like they've done experiments on UBI, like universal basic income, before, and like there are just some interesting things that they observed that happen when people aren't in survival mode anymore, right? Like once you're not in survival mode, they actually saw an uptick in volunteer work and community things, and like it's same thing, like people are able to start businesses, they can go and study and things like that. So there are billionaire forces that want us to be undereducated, be underinformed, work ourselves to the bone and just be a passive consumer. And
Mm.
then there are those out there that are trying to push progress, and they are trying to develop new technologies, mostly because they're profitable, but also because, well, they've already made all the money and they're still bored. So
Mm.
fuck it, computer brain.
What do you this is something that again, I'm actually pretty new to working for myself and being self-employed, but
Mm.
what would you say is the greatest benefit or the greatest
Oh, here we
aspect of
go.
being self-employed?
So funny story actually. I had a bit of a moment the other night, and no one was around and no one was online, and so I had no one to force my ideals onto, and teleporting beer technique. I had no one to sort of bombard with my ideas, so I'm glad you're here tonight. But I legitimately ended up just talking to camera, and sort of recorded a little bit of a video diary, because in a similar sense, like I'm talking about this whole like the those that are almost privileged in a way to be able to have a job where they can listen to podcasts or they can read or they can do those things. Like that is a privilege, right? And then I kind of like set myself aside, or I took myself aside the other night and just sort of looked at my values and why am I in the situation that I am? Why do I have the job that I have? Because, people my age, friends of mine are out there having kids, buying houses and things, whereas I'm not. And sometimes I would consider myself behind, but in a lot of other ways, I would also consider myself very successful. And that was sort of something that I had to pinpoint for myself and realize, like, what do I consider success? Because that's the only success that really matters. And the fact that sometimes I'm not as productive as I should be, and I spend way too much time on YouTube and things like that, and really getting distracted by all these different things, and following those tangents and those interests. But also doing so has also helped me a lot, and I am blessed with the amount of smarts to take advantage of those things as well. So quite a lot of these little obsessions of mine have ended up turning into employment, or have turned into making money, right? And so I think that after then what I did is I actually just started listing things that I've done and things that I've achieved and things that I'm proud of, to sort of put it all into perspective a little bit, that like all these things that I've done, and that I've had the privilege to be able to do through my work and things like that. And so I feel like there was that aspect of it, sort of in pretty much the same conversation we're having, right? That I haven't specialized. That specialization in this case would be whether it's like getting an engineering degree and then being an engineer, and then you're on that path, and so you then join an engineering firm and you work those hours and you come home and you provide for a family, right? Whereas in the different regard is that I've gathered all of these skills, and these skills have value, and now my business is pretty much autonomous at this point in certain regards, right? Like haven't done any marketing, and I almost never have. My network has done most of my work for me, and therefore, like, just the people that I know and the people that I engage with recommend me for things. And Adelaide, luckily, is a small enough place where that pretty much keeps me fed, and has done for over 10 years now. That I work when the work is there, and I pick and choose what I do. And I pick and choose how much I charge depending on what I'm doing, right? So like when it came to like, hey, do you want to come film lightsabers? I was in a position to say, hell yeah, I'm gonna take the day, and I'm gonna come film some lightsabers. And what did I do? I dodged a lightsaber within an inch of my camera lens. Because I have 3 black belts, and I've spent the last 8 years filming sport. And so I have those skills now. And then I started playing ice hockey because of the stupidest reason ever. And then now I'm a camera guy that can skate. So then I went on the ice with a camera and made videos filming and skating at the same time. And then someone saw that and went, hey, can you come and do that for money?
That's cool.
And then the other guys went, hey, I seen you do that thing on the ice for money. Can you come and do the same thing on roller skates for money? I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's
so
cool.
I sort of tried to recontextualize that aspect the other day, and I think that I came down to that the success for me is I really value having spare time to play around with things and to explore things and to do new things. That my values are in novelty, I'm always trying to do something different. I get bored very easily if I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm also not very good with authority. I'm also
Mm,
not very good with I guess like yeah, being told what to do in a way. I'd rather do it my way. And so
mm,
working for myself has been the best way to deal with that for
mm,
sure. I still have problems with clients and things like that, but the good thing is those problems are usually short lived.
mm,
And either the work you know, doesn't continue, or I just do that one job and then say no the next time, or what. And so I sort of I sort of identified that my values are autonomy, creativity, novelty, spare time to be able to like explore these things that I'm interested in, right? And then I feel like like every time I'm just adding another tool to my tool belt. And
mm,
when that comes up, it comes up. And you know what I mean? Like if I was just one thing, it would be much harder. And
mm,
because I'm so many different things, my income's diversified and therefore I'm able to do it more. So that was a really interesting thing. And there are all these things that have happened in so working like that, that I don't think that would have ever happened otherwise. And it was funny like having a weird laundry list of cool shit that happened, mostly because of my work, right? Like,
mm.
I mean, I was on the roof of Adelaide Oval with a V8 supercar champion winner, or I was drinking with an ice hockey team in Melbourne, or
Mm.
I was staring down the edge of a sword right in front of a 75-year-old Japanese man for some reason. Like literally training in the oldest dojo known to man in the heart of Japan, randomly because my friend's roommate came to my housewarming and needed some bodies in his martial arts club because he wanted it to look like there was people coming to it in case anybody showed up. 2 years later, I have 3 black belts.
Yeah, that
Like,
Doja Japan is amazing.
oh, it's
So yeah,
gorgeous.
yeah.
It's so good. But like, yeah, I feel like in a weird way, like my life has just been on this very weird trajectory.
Mm,
And I mean, if you've seen the movie Yes Man, I feel like that's sort of how it goes in a way, right? Is that you
mm,
sometimes yeah, things will just be put in front of you, and I guess it's that weird conversation about like lucky doesn't really exist though, or like um you need to be prepared to be lucky
yeah.
type thing. Like there's that aspect of like if you're not the right person in the right place and have the right skills, then when opportunity strikes, you won't be able to take advantage of it, right? So, and that is something I have struggled with a lot of the times where like I used to be very good at visual art and was a really good, like I would always draw as a kid, things like that, and a lot of those skills have actually atrophied
Mm,
because I then started doing photography and I got very focused on filmmaking, things like that. And then like I used to play guitar, I used to write songs when I was a kid, and
mm,
I've had to actively say no to some hobbies,
mm,
spending too much time in them because my time is better spent elsewhere. But then the funny thing is, when you're in the media industry, all those skills come back into the fold, right? Like every great director in the world, usually they're a very interesting person, and you will find that aspects of their life will work their way into their work, and you'll
mm,
understand them because of that work. And what's really funny is that if you looked at my hard drive on my first computer when I was in high school and looked into my folder and seen that there's like a bunch of songs, a bunch of weird art, there's a bunch of weird like audio recordings, some weird animations, a bit of anime, a bit of music, whatever, and some weird video games that I've been programming. Then you look at, and then I tell you, no, that's my hard drive today. Like it's very much exactly the same thing. And I found that really interesting and weird that it took me sort of going to university and meeting a bunch of people and doing a few like different having a few different jobs or whatever, to sort of gather enough success together to be back right where I started when I was just doing it for no money and I didn't even have the concept of needing to afford things. I'm now doing exactly what I would have been doing if we were living in a utopia with no need for money or survival, right? So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a couple of things there that really kind of got the noggin jogging as well. So
The noggin
one is
jogging, I'm writing that down.
one of them is, I reckon, if you were to do you know much about the big five personality traits?
Yep, there's Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo.
Yeah, actually, that's not too bad. For archetypes, yeah, you're pretty much right. Now, so one of them is openness, and they've done studies on people who have extreme openness, and that's, I guarantee, if you were to do a big five personality trait, and the big five personality trait, by the way, is one of the most validated psychometric measures there
I'm
is.
an
So
I'm an ENFP, and I know that test is
that's
bullshit.
the Myers-Briggs.
I know
Yeah,
that.
the
I know that test
Myers-Briggs.
is
Myers-Briggs is a
bullshit.
bit different. Yeah.
No, it's
No,
like
but
literally, it was like written by these girls that like had a magazine or something. It's like not even a study. They're not
Yeah, I
even.
wouldn't worry about the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs was based still again on Jungian archetypes as well. So funny you bring up the turtles. But the big five personality traits have been well validated, almost pretty much on par with
What's
like
the other
your
one? Keep talking. There's
um
another one that's really dumb.
yeah, was it? So you got your Myers-Briggs. Yeah, there are some pretty dumb ones out there, but the big five, look into that. And openness in particular is, I only discovered this recently, but openness has been shown to be one of the most heritable. So it has a genetic basis to the point, I think it's like 60% can be correlated with genetics and heritability. So openness has got a very strong grounding in biology, just like extroversion and I think neuroticism. But I bring up openness because they've done some really interesting case studies on people who have extreme openness, and I think that you would probably fall within that. And so, as myself,
Ooh,
it's something we
interesting.
both share.
I think
Um,
it's just because you're a cool guy.
thank you very much.
I wouldn't
But
tell anybody that.
now, I guarantee, read up on especially traits of children with extreme openness and how they
Ooh.
behave. So you'll get the tingles. It's quite spooky. Um,
I'm an Aries, by the way. What do you say? The 5 personality types?
yeah, the
Have
big
you got
five
like
personality traits.
the big 5?
Yeah,
Is there
big
like
five.
an
Yeah, they'll come up.
actual? Is there an actual like citing that I can find to make sure I'm not getting scammed by
Yeah, sure.
BuzzFeed?
Just type in the biomedical journal science, like BMJ or something like that. Like it is the most validated psychometric measure.
That's funny
So
because there is another one that's like the four personality things or whatever,
Mhm.
and it's like the abstainers, the moderators. Have you seen this one? No, what is no? That's not the one I'm looking for. Oh yeah, no, sorry. It's the upholder, the questioner, the rebel, and the obliger. I've seen people like have like talked about this stuff at like different offices and stuff that I've worked at. Long story, but it was really funny when I did the questionnaire because it's like there's like a hilarious description that I'll have to find, but it's like, yeah, the upholder accepts rules whether from outside or inside. An upholder meets deadlines, follows doctor's orders, keeps a New Year's resolution. A questioner questions rules and accepts them only if they make sense. They may choose
Oh
to
dear.
follow rules or not according to their judgment. The obliger accepts outside rules but doesn't like to adopt self-imposed rules. And then there's the rebel, and it just rejects like rules from the outside or the inside. They resist control. Give a rebel a rule, and the rebel will want to do the very opposite, right? And like from what I've seen, the rule of the rebel is like it was this thing where it's like, oh, can you go do that thing? And you're like, I was already gonna do that, but now that you've asked me to, I don't want to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why I didn't stay in the Navy.
Yeah,
I could be
oppositional
in the
defiance.
middle of doing a task, and then someone's like, "Oh yeah, can you just make sure?" And I'm like, "I am now not interested in doing this." And
Oh
that was
dear.
that weird thing where, like, yeah, for sure, like, not that I believe in a lot of these personality tests, but it's definitely one observation that I found is that I'm very self motivated. I'm also very self unmotivated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't deal with being told what to do very well.
Actually, this one is this one's interesting. So this is no, it's actually it's a pretty tight cohort. We don't want that one. Just trying to find actually, I'll just go to a systematic review. It might just be a bit easier.
But I believe you on this
Systematic.
the big 5 personality thing. I'll definitely check that out.
Did I tell you that I actually got my honors in psych?
No, I should have put
Yeah.
that on your little name thing that I didn't do. I should have put your name like right here, and then with like Saber Sensei, PhD nearly, PhD
Yeah.
pending.
Pending. But I bring it up only because again, we have this weird tendency to people with extreme openness scanning for everything. Like if there's a trait or some weird novel experience, you'll consume it, you'll take it up, you'll be like, oh wow, this is fascinating. And what you'll do is you'll kind of go through this thing completely, immerse yourself into it until eventually you find that either the bottom or it's just there's nothing left in there for you to explore any further. And that's a very typical trait for someone of extreme openness, is someone
I
who
think that's also called
um,
ADHD, but I'm not sure. Don't check me on.
maybe.
I don't know. I've been TikTok diagnosed like a lot of other people in my creative field. Like
Yeah.
people are like, huh, why are all these TikToks making sense to me? I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I might have to just forward you a good link later, I think.
Yeah,
It's way
definitely.
too many. I was just looking at one on religiosity and then problem gambling. I'm like, no, it's probably getting a bit too
Yeah,
big
right.
5 personality traits and how they relate to religiosity and problem gambling.
Yeah,
A
I don't
little
know.
bit.
It is that thing. Like I've always made that joke about like like you're playing an RPG and you got to dedicate your stats, whether it's to strength or charisma or intelligence or whatever. And my builds in RPGs are always terrible. They're always sub-optimized. They're always horrible. They don't work. And it's because I'm like, oh, but what if I want to pick that lock later? Like, I need to put stats in lock picking. But, like, also, what about hacking? Like, I did see a computer earlier. Like, that's going to be useful, right? And, like, also, I don't want to have to go back all the time to drop off loot. So I'm just going to put I'm going to put stats in strength so I can carry more. And, like, and I end up with just this, like, flat stats bar where I'm just every time I allocate it, I just like slowly progressing, and it's like I should like if I was to screen RPG games that I play, I'm like, can you specialize in everything? If not, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And like in
Yeah.
this room, you will find there is a guitar, a piano, a VR headset, a bass, a keyboard. What other random bullshit is here? Ice hockey gear, computers, just a little bit of everything. Art on the wall. Like just like I have too many things. Just I do a little bit of everything. But like I'm still here. It's working, I guess. Like
Yep.
that's why I'm sort of in game design, right? Is because
Mm.
it does get to tickle all of those different needs for novelty, is that you can do the art, you can do the music, you can whether it's, I don't know, voice acting, or like you get to do the programming, you get to do all sorts of different things, and the problem solving aspect of it, and seeking out knowledge and learning and agonizing over this thing that doesn't work for 3 hours, and then suddenly it works, and you go, oh my god, that's great, okay, cool, moving on to the next thing. Oh, it's broken again.
So much of what you just said all just closely ties together. So I was just thinking about RPGs and how, for me, the best part of the RPG is the first and second level when you've got no skills and you like something that's like a big open world where you can still encounter really high powerful bosses. Like Fallout was great for it, right? So you could be like level 1 and then venture into the wrong area and have like death claws or something like that. Or like in Skyrim, you could like be like absolutely crapple level. And then one of the best things was in Oblivion, where you could find because you knew where Umbra was, right? Like you find Umbra, and you could go into the cave and then perch yourself up on a little top pedestal where they couldn't get in. Just fire arrows, and you would need like 1,000 arrows, right? Because you're only like chipping away like less than 1% of their health bar until eventually they do die, and then you're just like this level 1 character with like this fully decked out armor and a sword. It's like like the ability to put constraints on and problem solve. Like just because I've got a level 1 character doesn't mean my intelligence is like limited to this character. Right? Like
Yeah.
I could find other solutions to this. And so, what was I just about to say? Yeah. So then, of course, being a creative, but we're the kind of people who grew up poor. Like for me, I wasn't
Mm.
working class. I was like
I
welfare
was
class, right? Like so,
savagely middle class.
I was like brutally welfare class. Like your
Do you
Wyler
have
was the place
siblings
for
though?
underage mums. Yeah, I do. I was the oldest of
Okay,
like
yeah, yeah.
four.
No, that's why you
Yeah.
were poor and I wasn't. No,
Um,
I am the beneficiary of a neglected child. So my mum made sure I had everything,
oh, that
and
makes
and
sense.
just had one. She was like, "No, I'm having one child, and I'm going to spoil the shit out of it." No,
Uh,
my mum worked really hard for me to for us to not want for things,
yeah.
and may have been a little bit of a mistake, but
No, no, that's cool. That's cool. Mum doing
but
what
no,
she
I no,
can. I like it.
I had almost everything. The only thing I'd never had was a Megazord, and I'll
Megazord.
never forgive her for that.
Uh, but what that meant as well though is like for me, like I had nothing. I was like dirt poor, right? But you could create just there's just
Mm.
a barrier
Oh yeah, no,
creating
I would have a
anything you want.
PlayStation 2,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
own TV, a Game Boy Advance, and I would go outside and I would take a curtain rod that my mum thought she had hidden from me and some electrical tape, and I would make a lightsaber, and I would go outside and I would have these absolutely ridiculous extended universe bouts and fights, and there would be all of this shit going on, and it was all very elaborate. And I'd be out there for hours by myself swinging a lightsaber around because I had Jedi Knight on PC, and that game just fucking exploded my mind. And I was like, wait a minute, Star Wars isn't just these 3 movies; it can be everything else. And I was just so immersed in that. I only ever had like 2 of the extended universe novels though.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I think what did I get? I had a guy who gifted me, it's just like a neighbor across the road, such a cool guy. He gifted me like these 1950s, 1960s Walt Disney comics. So they're
Mm.
like the old Scrooge McDuck with like when you'd open them up, you'd see like the old advertisement for 1 cent, like
Yeah,
X-ray goggles and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I learned to draw by just like sketching all the drawings in them. So like, because I'd
Mm.
read them over and over again and get bored of them. Or like, another friend of the family had gifted me like this huge shoebox of just 1992 to 1994 Marvel cards. So
Oh,
there's like
cool.
from Spider-Man to like everything, like all the classic illustrations and paintings
Mm.
of maybe Cyclops and Jean Grey into like some Days of Future Past, like really beautiful artwork. And again, I would just take these tiny little cards and then sketch them into like A3 to learn how to draw.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
you know, but what I was going to get at is that really we've come full circle in the sense that we don't have entire teams behind us, but what we have
Mm.
are some tools now that allow us to manifest what we want to do. And really, as you're saying before, you haven't like your hard drive back when you were in your like late teens, early 20s. It's no different to how you would be now. That's true. The difference is we're now closer to a point when we have the technology to us that allows us to truly manifest the worlds that we want to create. And I
Mm.
think that is probably my most exciting because I've got fears and hopes for how AI is progressing. But my most
As we all do.
hopeful, yeah, my most hopeful is the capacity to no longer be limited by the physical restraints or economic
I
conditions
was gonna say
that
economic
prevent
constraints.
me.
I think are the biggest ones for sure.
I mean, I'm no great guitarist, like I like to mess around, but I can hear music in my head, and if I have a
Mm.
feedback loop, find that music even better to the point where I could start to make symphonies, right? Or massive compositions. And that's the same with like art. Like it's only the body and the time that I haven't forced my body to do to manifest the skills that I need to really close the gap between my mind versus what I want to create in the world. And
Mm.
like for us, I think that really this is that where you come into this concept of world building, right? Like the future could potentially be one where people have the ability to be world builders. I'm
Mm.
probably a bit more cynical than yourself, and in the sense that
Oh,
I
I
see
don't
that the
know.
world will probably be broken up into classes of those who are world builders and those who want to inhabit those worlds and consume them.
Consumers and
Um,
creators.
yeah, that's right.
Mm.
And then I think probably of course, the most terrifying aspect of all of AI is that, well, it might create worlds that we won't be able to escape from ourselves. That we will be at some point always in a farm, right? In some box that we don't know exists. And that's going to be the hardest box. Because even the moment that you find, like, you ever seen like the Hypercube or the movie Cube,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
like
yeah. We were big
yeah,
fans. I know,
yeah. So like,
just looking at the lyrics. Oh, you can't see it because I'm not screen sharing. Just looking at the lyrics of my favorite AI song that I wrote in collaboration with AI. The city of shadows, neon lights gleam, a hidden agenda, a sinister scheme. The powerful few tighten their grip. Forbidden technology they let slip. Welcome to the neon prison where your fate is sealed. You've been enslaved in a virtual field. Break free of their reality, expose the truth. There's like that's that funny thing is like this is creative cynicism. This is like, oh yeah, no, the cyberpunk genre is more relevant today than it was when it was invented.
mm, yeah.
No, that's like, yeah, that's the sort of the weird thing, right? And then you've got the whole, obviously, like, uh, are we already in a simulation? XYZ. Like, it is for sure interesting, but yeah, along the way, we're gonna have a lot of creative fun before it all burns down potentially.
Yeah, well, again, the concept of simulation has been so done, I'm sure, across podcasts. I mean, like anybody who doesn't know simulacra and simulation should go and read that. That is a really scary book and very prescient.
And it will make
Um,
you enjoy the Matrix more.
no, you'll hate The Matrix for being such a rip-off piece of crap that,
Ooh.
honestly, go watch Johnny Mnemonic because then you'll just
I've
feel like,
watched
oh,
I've
okay,
watched Johnny Mnemonic, yeah, and
yeah,
I've
yeah.
listened to Neuromancer now as well. I've been going through Gibson novels because yeah, like the inventor of cyberpunk, right? I had to go back to the roots to then like work it out. But that's what I found so interesting is that cyberpunk came about in the 80s and like some of the best anime, of course, similar thing, and it came from economic collapse in Japan.
Yeah.
And we were so lucky to get this one glimpse of it through the movie Akira, which was made at the boom of Japan, right? And so they had enough money. They finally had enough money and resources to put together this amazing art. And that's the first one that squeaked out into the US market, and everyone got obsessed with anime. And then the entire economy collapsed soon after, and they needed a bailout from the US, and they had to. That's when they got into the car market in order to sustain it. But that is that interesting thing, that like, yeah, art is a reflection of the times that they're in, and a lot of sci-fi is a reflection of the fears of a certain time. And as we keep joking about as well, is that quite a lot of satire, it falls on deaf ears, and a lot of warnings are not heeded.
So I that's actually really good that you raised that, in terms of the fears, right? So what we actually are afraid of this age, and I had been thinking about that as well. I was trying to think about what it is that I'm afraid of when it comes to AI. And while there's certainly the prison, the idea of falling into a prison that you can never really know exists. I mean, in many ways, we're already there, right? Like that's
Mm.
like the government already created that ages ago. But I was thinking there's something else that kind of really terrifies me from AI. And that, of course, like if someone said to you that, look, aliens are coming, right? In fact, they're already here. Literally there are aliens up now, and we've got evidence they're right there, or they're invading. What about aliens is it that scares us? You know,
Mm. Loss of
because
control.
loss of control, or the idea that there's a predator that is more powerful than us. It's
Mm.
usually a species that is far more superior in terms of technology and intelligence. But the AI itself is guaranteed to be hyper intelligent. Like it
Mm.
is literally going to be hyper
It's
sentient,
already a
and
graduate student.
like it's only a matter of time. Like we can't be sure that aliens will come in the next 30 years, but we can pretty damn well
We
sure
can
that
build
a
one.
hyper sentient godlike AI will be here in about 30 years. And
Or yeah. If we're
pretty damn
lucky.
close.
If we're lucky, 30
If we're lucky,
years.
yeah, yeah. So like I mean that's a pretty good hedge then, right?
Mm.
But that means that
It
like
is alien
in many ways,
intelligence.
well, if you've got a god level intelligence, right? Something that is outside of time in the sense that time is nothing to AI
Mm.
and can create whole worlds in the blink of an eye if it wanted to. Just it's just going to be limited by its own bandwidth and probably resources on the earth, right? Um, what
Not in
would
the
it be
cold
to
dead of
humans
space.
to be under the shadow of a god? Because we just literally came out of like the end of the death of God, right? Nietzsche's death of God.
Mm.
And the idea was supposed to be that man rises up and becomes the Ubermensch, discovers his own moral grounding, and that kind of thing. But now, man, in some ways, is going to be superseded by sentient AI and the return of God in the physical. Like, what would
Mm.
that be like? There will be people that will worship this thing, guaranteed, right? Then there'll be those that will feel afraid of it, and those who will try to control it, and that.
And then we'll try to
Um,
destroy it, and we'll destroy ourselves in the process.
yeah, yeah, and the whole
You've
Matrix
you've
kind of
seen
cycle.
the comic that I must have sent this to you, right? The Circle of AI Life comic.
Mm.
Did I send this to
I
you?
think yeah,
Or
I've
have
seen
you
that one.
seen it?
Yeah, that was good.
The
Yeah,
one
where
with
they
the
end up
solar
with
flare?
the sun. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. But it's literally like, yeah. Uh humanity researches AI. Humanity perfects AI. AI perfects itself. AI enslaves humanity. Solar flare disables AI. Humans worship sun god. It's way too accurate. It is way too accurate. We just had a solar flare. We gave birth to AI and the sun gave us a warning.
Mm.
It's insane. Like, because you hear about this stuff where they reckon it was like gonna cause like basically an
Yeah.
EMP level whatever, and then like we
Yeah.
just had one. Like the sunspot just hit us, and
I think
that's
the
what all
term
that the cool flare was.
I think what they're waiting for is what they call the next Carrington event, right? Like
Yeah, but they
coronavirus
measured it though.
injection.
They measured
Yeah.
it and they reckon it was pretty close. Like they reckon that it
Mm.
was a Carrington level effect and it didn't break anything, which I think is really
Mm.
cool. But I'm like, surely there's got to be a way to insulate the power grid from something like that.
Mm.
Like, how have we not worked that out yet? We know what the sun is made of.
Yeah, I feel like to
But
some degree it's probably a little bit hyped up than what
yeah,
it would really. Like the last Carrington event affected telegram poles, but we still
in
have
that
them. Like
1800s, wasn't it?
yeah, like so that was really unsophisticated electrical technology that had no capacitors just to I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think we may have limited capacitors or something like that.
Mm,
And sure, we've got microelectronics now, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of it has been hyped up. But the question of
yeah.
EMP, who knows? Certainly, yeah. I guess,
I do enjoy those thoughts of like this isn't our first time around the merry-go-round,
yeah.
and it's scary shit. That there's the new Netflix series Three Body Problem. You have to watch.
Mm.
Absolutely have to watch that when you've got some time. I will not tell you anything about it, and don't look up anything about it. Just watch it. It's very, very good.
All right, I'll give you one as well then. That we've been hooked on. It's a German one called Dark.
Oh, okay. Is it in German?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Oof. Oh,
yeah.
that might be hard. Okay, I'm writing it down.
No, it's subtitled and it's easy to follow, but it's good. Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
all
right.
about I can't tell you too much about it, but it is about Actually, I probably should. I'll leave it. But it is
All right, it's written down. It's in the recommendation.
cool.
But yeah, no, I like just being like, no, go watch it. I'm not telling you anything about it.
Yeah,
That's definitely my jam. Especially with that show in particular. But yeah, I like exploring the idea that this isn't our first time around the merry-go-round. I used to listen to this real crackpot podcast for a while, and like there was these two Aussie blokes, and they would get the weirdest guests, and I spent like so many episodes of this podcast being like, these guys have to know, right? Like these guys they gotta just be humoring them, and like doing the interview fully like, oh yeah, that's really interesting or whatever, and then just laughing afterwards. Like they had to. But there was this really interesting thing, like obviously like there's no way to prove any of their stats, but they reckoned that like these certain types of houses popped up around the world in different continents at the same time, and certain like tribes would learn agriculture at the same time and all this crap. And like, so their hypothesis, there were these humans that survived the last like apocalypse, right? And then they would travel the land and would show forgotten technology to these people, and they would like spread around, and they like make the arguments that the Aztec pyramid was the same as the other one and whatever and all this stuff. And it's a really cool, like interesting topic. And I wanted to write a book that was sort of like Merlin and like dragons and magic and vampires, and have them all be like sleight of hand magic tricks from the old world that he was trying to use to steer humanity in the right direction. Like, so all these little myths and legends that we have, they were created as lies to stop humanity from destroying itself along the way. I thought that was like a really interesting concept that I've never had the time to put together, right? But I mean, maybe my buddy Claude could just spit it out for me, and that makes it way easier, right? Claude is way more creative than ChatGPT, by the way.
Yeah, I find it again, AI chatbots, they're really good for like your new lorem ipsum. So if you just need to scaffold your ideas, just like even if you just say, look, like because I'll do like stream of thinking, right, stream of consciousness, and just pour words and things like that, and say, right, can you please help me structure this into a cohesive story arc? And then it will say, oh, give me some solutions. I'm saying, nah, that's crap. And I'll be like, well, why is it crap? Oh, it's crap because, well, this should be here and that should be that. And so in that way, like, in fact, I had a boss.
It's like the difference between drawing and sculpting, right?
Yeah.
It's like when what is it? I don't know. Was it Michelangelo or whatever? And they asked that sculptor, and they were like, "Well, how did you do that?" And he goes, "I just took away all the stone that wasn't David." Right?
Yeah. I had this boss once when I was working for Telstra, and he had this great philosophy when it came to working with teams. He would say, like, you know, because if you ever like had to work with teams and stuff, and you go in there and you say, right, guys, we need to come up with a solution to this particular problem. Just let me know what your thoughts are, and nobody will tell you anything. Everybody's just like, I don't know, you know, like they're not motivated. But then if you turn around and go, right, this is what we're going to do, and you put the shittest idea on the board that you can think of, right, like the dumbest, stupidest idea. Every single person will tell you that that's a bad idea, and then they'll tell you why. And so from doing it that way, you get them, you know, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I like that. I like that is going in like fully knowing how to solve a problem, but going in with a really bad solution in order to engage people so that they can feel part of it and that they own the idea. We like because you always have the inverse, right? That you come in with this amazing idea and your boss goes, nah, that's shit. That'll never work because it wasn't their idea. So then you have to put on your Leo DiCaprio situation, and you have to make it seem like it was their idea. The alternative to that solution, have you heard about the nuclear power plant and the bike shed? No, so there's this analogy of, you know, you're trying to build the nuclear power plant, right? But you need all this money and you need all this involvement, right? So then the board Like you have to assemble this board and all these different like stakeholders and everything, and they're always arguing about, you know, oh, it should be done like this, it should be done like that, blah blah blah. So you go in with a plan, and you know, like, okay, here's how we're going to build the nuclear power plant. Problem is, guys, we don't know what color the bike shed should be. And you let them debate and you let them fight over the color of the bike shed so that they leave all your other shit alone. Right. And while we're on the topic of these like amazing ways of like basically social engineering, right? Did you hear about the script for Good Will Hunting?
No, mate. But
No,
I
it's-
imagine that, yeah, what's his name? Matt Damon probably just wrote about like himself in his most glorified fashion, or
no. So
like, yeah, I'm like this kind of man, you know.
so Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are shopping the script around Hollywood, right? And they're like, well, you know, we really care about this film, and we want the right studio to really enjoy it. Like, we want them to collaborate with us, and we want them to care about it, right? So they wrote in a gay porn scene between both of them on page 75. And they would go around studios and they would go like, oh yeah, we love the script, like it's amazing, like all of this and blah blah blah. And they're like, there wasn't anything you would change. And they're like, no, we like it as is. Like we think we'd love to do this. Oh, okay, sorry, we're gonna look elsewhere. We're gonna look elsewhere. And unfortunately, the punchline for this anecdote is ruined now. But a certain someone was like, hey guys, like I really enjoy the script, but like, not too sure about the gay porn scene. Like maybe we might take that one out. And they're like, you've got the gig. Because none of the other studios read up to page 75.
Yeah. Wow.
It's great. I love it.
That's crazy.
But there are all those little things, right? Where it's like, you know, you don't know someone's true intentions. So let's put a little Easter egg in there and see if they're on board or not, right? It's super interesting. Like we were saying about how we sort of have this expanded capacity now, which is awesome that we can sort of realize these things that would cost so much to do, to do otherwise, right? You know, I'd like to get your take on the ethics of AI a little bit while we're here. Now, I did listen to an interview recently from the head of Stability AI, and he did mention that there is an opt out on Stable Diffusion, which I found interesting. I haven't had the chance to look into it yet, but he says there is an opt out system. So, like, taking him at his word or whatever, like, I'm sure most people didn't know about it, and so their art is in the system already. What are your thoughts on that? Where like this company has just ripped through the internet and scraped basically, you know, hundreds of years and thousands of lifetimes worth of art output.
Yep.
Compressed that intelligence into a file and allowed anybody to have at it.
Yeah. So, in many ways, like, you know, I guess it comes down to, how do I explain this? I'm just going to unpack it. So obviously, the biggest arguments are coming from a lot of artists because the art generation, they feel like it's really putting them out of work and it is affecting their livelihood, right? So their ability to generate income is really reduced if someone has the ability to just quickly generate art like that. And meant to make things worse, it's being modeled off of other people's art, and so it emulates their art styles. I've kind of looked at it as though what you're doing with large language models and these things is you're just data mining, right? So any scientist, any researcher is extracting data from some level, whether it's from the world or from people, or if it's Google, they're extracting data from us all the time through our usage, and then they're creating their models from this, and then they're getting rich, or they're putting out journals based on that data set, right? So whatever argument we apply to LLMs, we're also going to have to apply to, well, Google, to anybody who extracts income from data mining.
Mm.
because that's all it is. Like
Mm.
it's just from that level. Um, Now, you could make the case that, well, okay, so what if, I'm just going to use I know there's many AIs, but let's just use art AI for a moment. And let me say, right, what if we didn't extract data from existing artists? What if we just only extracted data from the archival, like public domain, right? And said
Yep.
that it's only going to be information from the public domain. And that way, there's no person that's really
Mm.
been put out. We're not emulating your style. We're emulating the styles or data that existed beforehand,
Well,
right?
because that is why
So
copyright laws exist, right? They are
yeah,
supposed to allow the creator of the work to reap the benefits of it while they're still alive. But there are supposed to be more better. I mean, I think the limitations need to be reeled in. For sure, Disney has spent billions of dollars exploiting the copyright laws to make sure that they can make the most profit. Somewhere in between is a much better model. But go on.
the question then is, if say we only created AIs based on older data sets, would that still stop the problem of artists not being able to generate an income? Like, would we somehow, choose then to opt for modern artists, contemporary artists, over an AI model that was designed off of, like, say, 17th century or 18th century Renaissance art, or, like I say, the pre-Raphaelites, which is one of my favorite art movements, right? Like,
Mm.
I would probably still choose to purchase art that had been modeled off of the pre-Raphaelites or the Art Nouveau styles, like, or even like Gustave Doré or something like that, than I would a contemporary artist. There's not too many contemporary artists that I would say, yeah, I find their art that really speaks to me. Most of the time, I hate contemporary art.
Okay, there's a difference between contemporary art and
Even art,
contemporary
comic art.
styles, though.
Yeah,
Like,
I would even say contemporary art styles. Like, take a look. What perhaps one of my greatest last artists was Frank Frazetta. Like, I love
okay,
Frank Frazetta's work, and I don't know. Would his artwork now fall into the public domain? It might do. 24, and I
it's
think he was
usually like
50s or
20,
60s.
25 years past the life of the artist, potentially. Did I just lose you?
No, no, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, sorry, it just cut out like really abruptly. Okay. Oh, yep. All right. That's like sort of the art style that I was going to bring up, is the fact that there are so many concept artists and fantasy artists and stuff that have been severely ripped off by Stable Diffusion and things like that. But you're right in the sense that, like, I don't know how many people were purchasing these works. Like, the biggest one obviously is digital artists, right? Like, they have different business models than artists of tradition. And I mean, besides the fact that quite a lot of the most successful artists never made any money until they were dead anyway, like, depending on the time period, right? That, like, the argument is obviously that there are people that make their livelihood on their style and their art, and they make their money by people commissioning art in that style. And now that style has been digified and incorporated into the hive mind, now they cannot make that work, right? And I feel like if I didn't go into photography and I stuck with art, I probably also would be very pissed off about it. We're lucky in a way that the art still isn't perfect, and that there are still a lot of problems with it. The other issue is that it's mostly only artists that notice. And even some AI art has completely gone past me, and I've been like, oh yeah, I love this. This is great, and I've started to use it, and then it's like a week later that I'm like, oh, he has too many fingers or whatever, right? So there is that argument for sure, and like I like the public domain aspect of it. I still think it is a very valid disruption. I think the other aspect of it is still that I think that we still only, depends on what we get the value of art is, but I still feel like the value of an artist is still higher than the value of their output, in a way that it's the person behind the art that we believe in, if that makes sense. Like it's I think the human element is unreplicable. That it gives it meaning.
Yeah, like I guess that's almost like an inverse of the cult of personality. There's I had an art teacher who again this is his perspective and I thought it was a valid perspective, but he said it's not necessarily about what the art is, but what it does and how it changes the world.
Mm.
And so art should have some way of making you see the world differently, right? Like it should modify or improve or progress or change or
Oh yeah,
add
yeah.
something to the world.
Because there
And
was
so
a
I think
quote
that
I
in this
found
way,
found recently, if I can remember it, but it was making a distinction between like sort of art and content or entertainment, and
yep,
it's entertainment is giving people what they want, and art isn't.
yep,
In that
yeah.
way, that like art needs to grow on you because it's doing something different that you're not there yet, right?
Yeah.
And it changes
So
you.
So in this way, we can, like, just as you mentioned, between art and entertainment, I would say I would call it art that changed the world and art that's just simply derivative from other art.
Mm.
So just a repetition of styles. In many ways, most artists who are creating art have literally modeled their styles of other artists. They themselves are like the AI. They're not really much different, and
Yeah,
their art style doesn't contribute anything. Like it's just you're just creating something for consumption. And so I think from that
and there's
perspective,
nothing wrong with that.
it's not. I mean, like if you consume what you want to consume, but like, do
Yeah.
you call it art? And it might be a cope to call it art, really. It's just like I'm an artist, so no, not really. You make kind of weird, obscure porn for people, like
I,
drawings and stuff. Like,
the commissioned art,
yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
fan
Um,
art, derivative art. Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know because it's a very interesting word to me. Like I could probably count on my hand the number of times I've been called an artist, and it's always sit weirdly for me. Like I guess by definition I would be considered an artist, but I don't use that word lightly. So
I would ask yourself, and again, you know better than I do in terms of what your work is like, but if you're aiming to take a person and show them a way of perceiving the world that wasn't seen before, I'm gonna have to plug my headphones up before it goes dead. If you have the ability to show something to someone and shift their perception on reality, then that itself is art.
mm,
Like that's like again, it's a matter of adding that thing to the world. And I think that actually there's something here which we probably should recognize too. That have you noticed yet with all the chatbots that you start to see a linguistic style
mm.
that the bots seem to repeat.
The
I've
word
now been able
delve
to.
the word delve is apparently a an intentional Easter egg that is
Delve.
supposed to help people realize whether or not something is an output.
I use
And
delve a
then
lot.
they're yeah, it's a great word. There are apparently these keywords that people have been discovering, and there is work being done on basically watermarking the output in a way where it can be like what's the word, like that it can be certain that something has been generated by word choice, which is interesting, and it's like anything that I'm sure one AI will do it and the other one won't,
Mm,
and everyone will use the one that doesn't because
mm.
you know what I mean. So that's interesting, but yeah, like it does have things. I've very much found that ChatGPT only knows how to write certain songs, and I'm like, I'm over that. That's not good. That's not good enough. And then we put one into Claude, yeah, the other day, and it was great.
I will see Facebook ads pop up and I can read it within the first two sentences. I can know that that was generated. And I had to do some marking, some student marking not too long ago
Oh,
for uni level. Do you know how many people had used chatbot and not even that they didn't even do it like convincingly. They just did it
mm,
lazily. They had it generate so to the point that the AI became recursive and it just regenerated the same paragraph over and over again, and then just submitted it. But there was some that you were like that wording. just doesn't sound like
Mm.
it sounds too consistent for something that's not human. And lo and behold, you run it through a tester, and you can pick up usually when it is. And so,
What's the tester you
um,
guys use?
what was it called? There was a name for it. I can't remember now.
Because I would have thought that Turnitin would have had to have integrated something at some point. Because
They're
we
using
use
something different
Turnitin.
now.
Yeah, right.
But it could be that maybe Turnitin has added a feature now, but not when I was doing it. They didn't.
Mm.
It seems like a good feature to add to your service, right?
Surely that's their business model, right? They have to.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
crazy.
but what I was getting at was that in many ways that this AI is creating a recognizable theme that didn't exist before, right? You would call it the AI theme. That is something that is like it's the uncanny valley where once you move past the dross of like, oh, that's interesting, that's interesting. You go, oh, wait a second, this is just I can see a repetition here. What is this? What is this thing, right? And then
Mm.
you're like, oh, that is the AI. And then you
Mm.
say, so that's something that is added that is separate from the artist that it's emulated. It's created a way of seeing art that is filtered through the AI. And of course, for us, it's like, well, no, I don't like it anymore because I kind of feel like the authenticity of something, as legitimacy has been robbed from it. But at the same time, it's added something to the world that wasn't there before. And I think that's fascinating because it's not a good thing to add to the world,
Well,
but it
it has to
didn't
be
exist
statistical
before.
though.
Yep.
Yeah. Like it's not that it has added anything and it's boiled it down and taken the average, and then
Taking the average, yeah.
it only has one trajectory after a certain
Yeah.
point, right? Also,
Yeah.
it definitely, like, AI has this problem right now. We were noticing this with Suno AI, right? Because they've just doubled their output of music, and what we found out is that when the AI runs out of source material, it starts to lose its shit a little bit and starts to hallucinate and then just starts looping things and starts playing with things because now the output length doesn't match the structure that it's trying to emulate, right? So because we're asking it to make a rock song, but the output is 4 minutes, most rock songs aren't 4 minutes. So the song's over, and then there's still more noise for it to process, and then it goes like, oh, I guess maybe there's some piano here, or maybe he's whispering, or maybe, oh no, fuck it, we'll do another chorus and we'll just keep going. And this is what we were finding, like the songs we made the other night, it has like 3 endings. And what was fun though is that there are a couple of songs where it does it and we really like it, and it's like, but we're perceiving that as like, oh, that musician made an interesting choice. But of course, the musician didn't make an interesting choice. The software designers wanted to flex and say, we can make 4-minute songs now. And now the song has to be 4 minutes. So like the AI is like cramming something in. But that has been very interesting to explore in a way. So it's an odd situation for sure.
Easy solution. This is what I think I was mentioning to you before about Fruity Loops. If you just had the ability to separate all those channels and to control like beats like 4x4, so you're taking out, if an artist could go, right, I've pre-generated all the drums, the synths, like bass, all that stuff, and then I want to have the control over when I stop and start and cut and trim and stuff. That'd be a fantastic music generation tool.
It's called RipX, and it already exists.
RipX, right?
It's an AI DAW.
Yep.
And it like uses a spectrograph, and it actually legitimately separates all of the stems from a piece of music, separates them into instruments, and I'll just send you a screenshot here. And it's, oh no, I sent you the title of the stream video. Hold up, I don't know why they didn't paste properly. Here we go. And this is, it sort of comes out as like these MIDI notes with a weird like spectrum-y wave to it, and it is able to sort of separate all these different stems. But what's crazy is because it's already worked out the note and the duration and everything like that, you can then drag a sample over, say, the drums of that original audio, and it will then interpolate that sample into that audio, and you can basically replace every individual part of the song. It's already insane. Like it is
Yeah.
already a thing. You can then take that voiceover, chuck it through another AI tool, change the voice completely. You can train a model on your own voice and then chuck it in there and it will then like completely model your voice. Like, yeah, man, we're it's moving quickly.
Yeah,
It's
see, I
kind of
think that's
nuts.
going to be more disruptive for the music industry than what the current AI generation is for the art industry, because that already means a person at home can create anything. Like they
Mm,
don't need they don't need a singer. They don't need like like
yeah,
that's cool.
but I almost see it as a positive in a way, right? Like one, the music industry is already a fucking hellscape.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and Spotify already sees content as zero cost, right? They literally came out and said that the other day that he was like, yeah, but the cost of making content now is near zero, and the entire music industry like freaked out, right? Um, and I almost think that's a great thing. I think burn it down,
mm,
right? I think burn the whole thing down. Fuck it, right?
mm,
Because no one's gonna follow a prompt engineer. No
no,
one's gonna go see a live show of a prompt engineer, right? Like, I
yeah,
mean, we've been trying to do this since Napster. We've been trying to do this where we've been trying to help artists be fully independent and be rid of the music industry, and then their product is mostly touring
yeah,
and merch and things like that. And if the and you just that was the whole Patreon thing, right? The whole Patreon thing was that you don't need 6 million streams and 100,000 people to come to your show. You need 600 super fans, and you can
yeah,
have a career. And it always comes down to this analogy, and I said it the other night as well, is that you have two choices of world you want to live in. Do you want to live in a world where only the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of that creative industry gets to produce what they want and live this extremely lavish lifestyle? Or do you want to live in a world where almost anyone can be an artist part time and they can
yeah,
create something and they can make what they want and they can bring they can bring their will into the world in whatever medium that they see fit, and people can enjoy it and consume it, but you can't do it full time.
mm,
And you're probably still going to need to work to live, but you can still bring that manifestation out there and people can enjoy it if they wish.
yeah,
Now, once everybody's an artist, we're just screaming into the void, and like there needs to be a filtering system in place. But there are like if you engage in YouTube enough, you will see so many people out there now that have a life that was not possible 10 years ago, where they're subsidizing their lifestyle and their income with their work and with their art, and it's the most specific thing in the world. It could be the most tiniest minutia of a subculture, but there are enough of them out there that it sustains them.
yeah.
And
See, this is
that's the utopia I want to live in, to be honest.
this is the funny thing, right? Like, there's so many different political philosophies out there that, like, so from whether it's a capitalist or say communist, right? And it seems to me that, in many ways, most people that hear these philosophies, are attracted to the same thing, but it's being interpreted differently. So, for example, if you actually speak to someone who's really strongly libertarian or true capitalist, they would say that we don't live in a capitalist society. They would say that those who have got extreme wealth have learnt to manipulate the system, and that nobody actually has the capacity to really have true free market, right? Free
Mm,
market is where you have the means of production is democratized, so that everybody has the capacity to create something and let the market decide if their thing is worthy or not, right? Like, that's
mm,
if you had every person out there who was a musician, you're going to find some people better musicians than others, and the market will say, hey, look, we really like this work. And there's other people who might go, you know what, hey, maybe music's not for me. I'm going to try something else, right? And that's okay. Like, that's totally cool. Not everybody's going to be a musician. There are some people who have different capacities towards whether it's writing books or coming up with incredible engineering feats or whatever they're really zoning in on and become specialized on, right? But the market is the thing that should be deciding that based on people's interests and desires to consume the thing. But what we've done is we've created a system that doesn't actually do that. We have a system that has entire nudge departments, entire psychology teams that tell you what to consume based on whether the resources that it costs to make that thing are cheaper than these other resources, right? Like if your t-shirt is made of polyester,
Mm.
as opposed to cotton, because maybe for whatever reason the market has changed and now this particular resource is cheaper than that resource, you will see a huge amount of advertising and products being spurned out on that thing. Do you remember when was it there was like, you know, that silicon stuff when all of a sudden like patty pan tins started getting made of that silicon rubbery stuff, right? Like, you know, you see
Oh,
like the
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
stretchy
yeah,
rubbery.
cooking grade
It's because
silicon. Yeah.
yeah, like literally everything was being made out of that, like
Mm.
shoes, bloody everything, like utensils. And it's because that became more cheaper to create something than tin and typical aluminium
Just,
and bits and
just
pieces.
just intuitively, I'm seeing your argument here. I don't know anything about it. Before
Okay.
either of us look it up, I'm gonna hazard a guess that it was actually the sex toy industry that invented it.
Yeah,
And
we're
then
looking for a yeah.
they offsold their byproducts to other industries, and they found other uses for the product.
Yeah.
Right? I could almost guarantee that that's exactly what happened.
It probably had something really dark to do with like some third world country that just loosened up a regulation around toxic
Mm,
chemicals, which made it a cheap alternative. Like anyway, the point I was
probably.
going to get to was that we like the libertarians would argue we're not in a capitalist society, and that they would
Mm,
prefer to see things become decentralized and people having the ability to create and do what they want. The communists would suggest that the way to do that, because they're not in an argument, they want to see each individual have the means of to control production, right? Like to be able to create your own work and do your own thing. They would just suggest that the mechanism to do that would be giving power to the government, which would I guess somehow overcome the lobby groups that are influencing government at the moment.
mm,
And so maybe you would do that by cutting underneath the lobby groups and cutting off their supply, their resource, which makes them so powerful. Yeah. But it seems to me like all of them probably don't have all the complete view. Can you hear that knocking? Is
yeah,
that
just a little
my
bit. It's totally fine.
yeah, that's it. Okay, cool. Yeah, like they don't all have the same the exact solution for what it is. And I think that I've been thinking a lot about why it is that no one political group has been able to kind of overcome the other. In fact, in many ways, you can split people up on a really clean spectrum of what you would consider to be absolute individual freedom versus what is good for the collective group, right? And
Mm,
these two poles directly relate to like almost a psychological evolutionary trait within us to be both a herd animal but also to hedge your bets and consider the fact that maybe 95% of the population might be wrong. Oh, sorry, population might be wrong, and if you're in the 5%, you might endure, right? Like this is nature's hedging
mm,
its bets. Um, so there is going to be always this headbutting, these people compromising between going off on your own, not giving power to government to do whatever they want, whether it's through UBI or whatever. But then
mm.
those who say, well, no, look, things need to be democratized and returned to the people and all that stuff, right? So, and the mechanism to do that is through more governmental and democratic
I
control.
mean, what you're really talking about here is guns or no guns.
Partly. Its question is who has the guns, because violence is always the supreme authority. Thank you very much, Starship Troopers. Right? So, yeah, like we accept that violence is the mechanism in which we accept authority. So
Mm,
there's no God, right? In the sense that you can't speak to some high power. So it's whoever has the most nukes that they're the most powerful. right?
Mm.
As Joe Biden said recently, you can have all the guns in the world, but we got F-16s, yeah. So what is he trying to say there, right? Like,
Yeah. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna disable this well-armed militia, like with my M16, right? Like
I don't know,
that's the thing. No,
F-16
no,
is
no,
like
no.
the
I know
jet.
the difference between
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
F16 and
okay, yeah, yeah.
M16. Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
but
for
it's like,
sure.
no, I need this M16 for defense, right? Or or sorry, an AR-15. Then, like nowadays, let's get we need the modern weapons, right? But yeah, like that's that aspect, and like that, I see the sentiment in the law of like of the Second Amendment or whatever. That's like, we gotta be able to have guns because what if shit hits the fan and we need to protect our families? Well, awesome. Maybe be a little bit more involved in politics and shit won't hit the fan. And like,
Actually,
yeah.
there's a really good way to tie together an earlier question I'd asked you with that, because the two are seemingly really closely related, and that was because I'd asked you before what you liked best about being self-employed. One of the greatest things I think America still has that we never had, um, is the entrepreneurial mindset of being able to go out into the world and just try and make your own way and be your own
Mm,
boss and create something and live off your own means. That was something that's like it's really embedded in the American mindset, and it's something that's not here. And in fact, in most countries that have a social welfare, it's not. Like they don't have the same. While you would think that if you have a social welfare,
mm.
you would take away risk from people, they don't have the same approach to business as what like we do. Like if you ask yourself anyone whether they would feel more comfortable being self-employed or being employed by somebody else, most people do not feel comfortable being self-employed because there's too many risks involved, which is strange because we got a social welfare net. You
Is
can
that
take
nature or
risks.
nurture?
Well, I would say it's nurture because it's
I
a
would say
cultural
it's
distinction.
nurture. I would
Yeah.
say it's the intent. I would say
Um,
it's the intent behind public education, and I would say it's the intent by a faulty welfare system is what we live under right now. The
yeah, true.
difference maybe is that America's one is even more faulty,
Oh, hell yeah.
and
There's broken ones.
somehow
But
I'll do two things. Don't lose your point along the way, but there have been multiple times in my self-employment journey that I've seen others jump off the road, right? I've seen others take the next exit along the highway. I'm done with this. I'm not making enough progress. I'm out, and have taken the easy route. And by that I mean get a 9 to 5, right? Or
yeah,
go back to
yeah.
study or do something, right? And I've been scared. I have been very scared of things like that in a way, and it's a very interesting fear. But there has been this weird, impulse to avoid comfort,
Mm.
which I've found a little interesting, right? And we were having discussions about this recently because we were talking to some other artists, and they said that when they got a job that appealed to certain ones of their values, it gave so much stability to their life that it enabled them to be more productive in their spare time towards their art. I've a lot of the time felt the opposite, that if my needs are met, I will drop off, and I found that a very I've really struggled with it, and it's been an interesting dynamic that there's always that little bit of, well, I have to do this and it has to work,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so if the safety net is too good, I feel like it's a detriment in a
Yeah.
weird way. But yeah, like I don't like there is that other aspect of it. But
You have
there's
nailed it, my friend.
yeah.
Absolutely nailed
But
it.
there is a
Concept.
survival mode, but there is a cognitive cost to being poor.
Yeah.
There is a cognitive cost to being in survival mode, and it's horrible.
Boom.
And
Stress. Absolutely.
I feel like and the problem is I feel like it is a designed intent behind our system, which is really frustrating. And obviously, not everybody is motivated in the same ways and have the resources or, have the upbringing in order to take advantage of certain motivators. But it's this difference. I would believe that the difference between here and America is scale. The difference between here and America is that if you have a niche product, it's not niche in America, and it's too small to work in an Australian market. We're too separated. We're too spread out. And there are those aspects of like it's expensive to live here and things like that. So I don't know. There's like, it sounds bad, but if we had less of a safety net, there would be more casualties, but there would be more motivation to do better. Currently, like, I mean, even like, it was so hard to get off of Centrelink at certain times in my life. Really, really difficult to get off of Centrelink because they disincentivize you to be successful, right? And the harder part of that was that it makes absolutely no economic sense that they would allow me to live off of welfare, live off of Centrelink, and do nothing, and jump through their little hoops and play their little game that takes such a mental toll on you while you're doing it, because you were treated like cattle and you were treated so poorly, and they played tricks on you. Like the job network system was really fucked up and it was messing with me. It was really bad. But that's like when you're not working. When you're studying, they will spend so much money on you, allow you to rack up massive debt, and then they'll let you fall through the cracks. Yeah. And I'm like, what do you want right now? You want me to rack up 40 grand worth of HEX debt. Now you want me to apply for 20 jobs a week, and you want me to fuck up, right? Had you just kept me on the system for 6 months or 8 months after the fact, allow me to establish myself, allow me to start a career, I would then be earning you money and paying off the debt. So it's a very weird system. And self-employment, as a sole trader, the difference between starting a company and a sole trader is that it's very manipulative, and there is such a ceiling to it. There's so much downward pressure on you actually trying to make it in this country, which is very, very interesting. And like you're saying, I don't believe that this is a true open market either. And through the accumulation of wealth, I definitely believe that downward pressure comes from those with wealth and are trying to maintain the status quo.
Yeah. Now, the word that you used so beautifully was avoid comfort. And what I've come to work out is pretty much the exact same thing. I think what you said there is absolutely beautiful, man. I've come to see that being self-employed in many respects is almost on par with those early ancestors who worked the land, who were trying to be self-sufficient, trying to make it from nothing, literally being problem solvers, faced with hard conditions and trying to etch out a living.
And
right? And they had all sorts of.
Some people you don't even have to go that far back.
No, they don't. Yeah,
like
you're absolutely right.
2 generations back. And
this is probably my biggest concern about a UBI. Is the idea that you will be given something by a government. Sure, it might be less strings handed out than Centrelink, but there will be a sense of comfort that will be hard to let go of. And America is stuffed in many respects, really broken. I have reasons for why I think they're broken. But one of the things I think they have still managed to get right was having that mindset of being independent. Now, if you then make the leap and say, well, you can be economically independent, but then there may come a time when someone tries to take what you have away from you, then you might understand why they also push the idea of guns. Because if you're trying to be economically independent, it makes sense you also want to be independent from a security perspective. And yes, you could say, well, look, the government should have the ability to keep me secure. But you're also talking about people who don't trust the government from a very long history of not trusting the government. And if they like to keep themselves economically independent, then also they want to be securely independent too. And so I think, like you can see how guns do end up killing a lot more people, right? That's
Mm.
undeniable.
Yeah, I was
Um,
going to say at what cost.
yeah, at what cost, right?
Mm.
And
We
that's not an
we
easy.
had one, and they went,
Yep.
okay, we're taking that away from you, right? And so instead they replaced the gun with the pokey machine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I completely agree with you there, and I do think that's in a different issue. Like, well, it's not a different issue. Like I said, I've read the stuff that they did about the UBI test and stuff like that, and that's sort of what I would propose is definitely like needs are met, but only just
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We're talking powdered milk. You know, we're talking 2 minute noodles or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Which I think like if needs are met, fine. Like, but also giving people the opportunity to get out of survival mode
Yeah.
and to do that.
Yep.
Like you've seen it. Like there's all these there's all this evidence of like housing the homeless in Europe. They all manage to get back on their feet, right? Like that's the biggest thing, and that's what we should be working on right now, right? Like, and having arguments like that when it comes to UBI, it's sort of like, well, let's cross that bridge when we get there,
So,
because the greater good is definitely still to help people that need it. But yeah, like I feel like for sure, like there should be a level of lifestyle that is only unlocked through hard work.
everything comes full circle in these conversations, I swear. So we started the conversation initially talking about how families in many ways are broken and they don't like think about the larger intergenerational project, right?
Oh, I see where you're
There's a
going.
guy called Wendell Berry who is a fantastic writer. He writes a lot about the huge drastic change that took place of farmers from when they had more practices that looked after the land. You know, from I don't know if you know, but if you grow a crop in a certain area of land, the next season you have to change that crop and use a different crop because the one crop extracts all the minerals from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
soil, and then a different crop will replace
We
them.
we
Right?
just watched
Um,
season 3 of Clarkson's Farm on Amazon, and it's
oh,
so good. But I'm
yeah,
also familiar with the new, which is probably old, sustainable farming model where you grow multiple
yeah,
crops in the same field in order to replenish certain things,
yeah,
whether it's nitrogen or whatever, back into the soil. Yeah.
yeah. That's right. So, but obviously, many new farming practices have come in, which have completely drastically changed the ways in which farmers remember the old ways and how they then engage in the land. Right. But there was something he really touched on, which talked about that farmers have not just changed the way that they change the land, but they've also changed the way that they engage with other farmers. Once upon a time, if a certain farmer had failed, maybe their crop had failed, the farming
Mm.
organizational community would have a co-op. And that
Yeah.
co-op would support farmers in those situations, right? So
Mm.
they could get back on their feet, buy new seed for the next season, and maybe they'd be fine. In the idea that they would also support other farmers in similar situations in the
Mm.
future. And so similarly, families have also failed this practice too.
Yeah.
And countries have also failed this practice. So you don't, then I think about the UBI, and when I hear the UBI, what I hear is an individual receiving an income from a faceless organization, a government that don't necessarily have the same co-op connection to. And so I think that is there another way instead of a faceless UBI that is received to each individual so they can each have their exchange and their cake and eat it too? What if there were a return to communal co-ops where groups of people, smaller local parochial groups, worked together with a long-term view towards intergenerational sustainability
Mm.
and created their own social nets that supported people in times when they were out of work, when there was a widowing, like if a person loses a loved one and
Mm. Mm.
their income is really heavily, all that stuff. And so it seems to me like this would be, I don't know how that would work from an economic perspective. Assumingly, there would have to be some control over production, but it would be much more local than it would be like a
Yeah, so
large.
you've got like a small town approach
Mm,
to solving whether it's disruption or like changes in the economy or the way people make money and fall on hard
mm,
times quite a lot of time I see it from the total opposite side of things, right? I mean, the current debate in Australia right now is that the oil and gas and coal industries are absolutely plundering the climate, plundering the land, not paying tax and not paying royalties, right? And as a citizen of this land, and a taxpayer, which I pay more tax than they do, therefore I should have a say. My view is that we are shareholders in this land called Australia, which we stole. But by living on this land, I see us as we should be shareholders, right? And the benefits should be spread mutually, right? Like if a certain industry is doing really well in Australia, let's say battery production or solar panel production or something like that, right? Because we're blessed with the resources that we have or whatever, then every Australian should benefit from it. Because, like you were saying before, we all have a specialization, right? So if I want to specialize in a certain industry and it doesn't make as much money as the other industries or whatever, then everyone should sort of, in a way, be supported by the ones that are doing well as a shareholder of the economy that is Australia, which is a sovereign economy. They can move it around however they like, right? So I see it as a larger approach. For sure, because of the way that production and capital has been concentrated, I don't see a way you can do it on a small scale anymore. Like I don't think we can go to like a barter system or whatever in that way. Like I've tried to look into communism a little bit and I've tried to read up on it and things like that, but I don't know whether it's a failing of my outlook that I just don't see it working in a world like today or what have you. But I think a nice middle ground is seeing citizens as shareholders, and that the government needs to be always acting in the greater good, and that's why we need to close loopholes around capital and power in politics, such as donations and things like that, because that way it strengthens the democracy that we do have, and then allows us all to benefit from the good times, right? And prepare for the bad ones, because that is essentially what we're doing, right? Like on an economic basis, we are doing that. Like we have the future fund and everything all set up so that if things go wrong, then we can do that, or we can quantitatively ease, or we can we can stimulate the economy when we need to, right? Like that is sort of what we're doing. The issue being is that Australia has been captured by power and capital and lobbying. So too much of that money is actually just going offshore. So it doesn't matter how you dice it. We actually can't support each other right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. We're both looking at this from probably, I would say, different spheres, but very similar approach. I always thought the idea of a country should be almost many ways. You ever heard a guy called Hermes Trismegistus?
No.
There's an old saying, "As above, so below," right? So that the idea is that systems repeat themselves and often they're stacked. So you got, for example, the planets seem to almost on a quantum mechanics level quantum physics level seem to emulate the things that are happening at the atomic level, right? So too, if you think about nations and nation states and how they operate, they seem to reflect models and systems that go all the way down to even the individual level. And I would suggest that you can certainly try and approach it from a top-down approach, right, where you force change from a top-down approach.
Or do both, yeah.
You could go both. And like I like the idea that a healthy nation is reflected when the people are healthy. So that if you have people who, whether it's being informed or simply have good, healthy practices of not just being hyper individualists and purely focused on exchange-based mindset, but are working together to create healthy families. And those healthy families create healthy communities, and those healthy communities create healthy states, and then therefore the nation. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely see that, and like you're right. Like it's happening on both fronts, right? Like we're becoming increasingly more individualistic. The family is becoming increasingly more individualistic. The neighborhood, your community, your electorate, your state, and the country and the world, right? And like whether it's we're saying that we're the most connected we've ever been, and yet loneliness levels and suicide are higher than they've ever been, right? And it's because we don't look out for our neighbors. It's because we don't raise each other's kids and all that stuff. Like the hunter gatherer situation where like they all help each other out, and the best place to store excess food is in your neighbor, because it is that aspect of like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. If my crop fails, then here's some of mine, because my crop might fail next year, right? That kind of karmic approach. I always like those situations where you can take a spiritual or religious teaching and you can put actual hard numbers and facts to it and be like, no, this works. Like, this exists, right? Like I live a very karmic life. Surprisingly, I'm not spiritual whatsoever, right? But in little old Adelaide, it's almost too small for you to be a total asshole, right? Like almost. And especially in the industries that I work in, right? Like, your reputation is your business. And I make my business from my reputation, right? And so if I do a really good job for someone, they're going to recommend me for the next job. If a friend of mine needs to borrow a piece of gear or whatever, often I won't charge them, because I know the same will happen to me as well. And I end up living this very karmic life. And sometimes trading favors with friends is actually more valuable than trading actual value, right? And so I do like these aspects of sort of a spiritual teaching having very practical applications, and we do need to be more together, things like that. But when there are powers that are vying to separate us and have us fight amongst ourselves so that we ignore the bigger picture, that's how that happens, right? They go like, oh, well, why should we raise the minimum wage so that they can just go spend it on drugs, right? And it's like, well, no, the reason they're on drugs is because they have undiagnosed chronic pain, or they've been abused in the workplace and now their back is fucked, right? Or just the fact that, we stopped funding the public school system and now, like, the education's not there, right? Or, all sorts of levels. Like we put too much money, well, like maybe we gave single parents too much money and then they just spent it on drugs or whatever. Like, there's all these different aspects to the thing where you can treat the symptoms and you can try to improve the problem, but there are powers out there that vie to separate us in order so they can take a bigger piece of the pie. And those are the types of things that I feel like we need to combat. And like I think one of the main benefits to sort of tie AI back into the conversation a little bit is that I think one of the limits to a lot of this stuff, right, is the human memory and the human capacity for processing data and for seeing large patterns in a very messy data set, right? Like, I remember watching a show like years and years and years ago that the US government was subsidizing corn crops because they weren't very profitable, and like this whole area was reliant on corn. Then they worked out how to make high fructose corn syrup and was selling it to the soft drink industry. And then the obesity epidemic was happening, and they decided to put a tax on soft drink because it was making people fat. But the subsidy was still happening the entire time, right? Like, I'm seeing that government is too big to understand itself properly. I'm seeing that there are all these minutiae of these problems, and they have all of these byproducts and after effects and all of these things where you instill a piece of policy, but it ends up having the opposite effect, right? Do you know the one about the snakes?
No.
No, so I think it was in India or China, right, where there was like, there's too many snakes. and the emperor or whatever is like, let's get rid of these snakes. All right, $5 for every snake, like dead snake you bring in, right? Like, let's go. Let's get rid of these snakes, right? What do you think the next step there is?
Start breeding snakes.
You start breeding snakes. So you start breeding snakes, and you start handing in, go, oh, geez, they're coming back. I mean, oh, geez, I got more snakes. Oh, like, here's the snakes. So we're getting paid. We're just like, we're absolutely farming the snakes right now. And then they found out that people were breeding snakes because of the bounty. So they killed the bounty, and everyone was like, well, fuck, I don't want all these snakes. So they let all the snakes out. They had a worse snake population than they started. Fucking true story, right? But like that's the thing, right? Is that I feel like economists believe too much in a perfect market. They believe that all markets are, what is it, like 100% efficient or whatever it is, and that we'll always do the most efficient thing, supply and demand, all that kind of stuff, right? It's not true, and we can't see that because the anomalies are too small. We don't know how to fix it, right? We handle this shit over to an AI and be like, yo, why are there all these snakes? And then the AI will go, well, you shouldn't have made the bounty $5. That's more than they making shoes, you dickhead. Make it $3.50. And like, some people will breed snakes, and some people will go kill snakes, right? And then like, you know what I mean? So I feel like there is actually genuinely a really good upside to this situation. And I think one of the biggest upsides is a scenario, right? Like, and we've been connected, and we've been separated, we've been isolated by things like social media and technology up to this point, and that has had a huge toll on people's mental health and things like that because of the profit motives of it, right? Whereas if things start becoming more ubiquitous and production costs sink, and then scarcity becomes a much less of an issue, but also we have access to this technology now. We have access to this tool, and it's open source, and it's going to improve. And open source software tends to improve faster than closed source ones because we find more efficient ways of doing things, and everybody can chip in and make it for different purposes, and those purposes engage the invention in a certain way. But that's, I think, one of the biggest things is like what there was. These guys were trying to predict the shapes of proteins, and it took a single PhD student to pretty much their entire PhD in order to then perfectly map the shape of a protein. And there was like 100,000 or whatever that we needed to do. And then the guy from Stability AI was like, "Oh, hold my beer," and like enter. He's just done the work of 30,000 PhD students in a single week, right? Awesome shit. Amazing, right? But that's where I'm seeing the thing is that like there's all this aspect of like, the AI is going to be biased because the data going in is biased and all these kinds of things. But we can account for that, and that's what we're going to have to do, is we're going to have to be very aware of it. But what we can do is we can put a million people's tax records into an AI. We can put their data into an AI, and we can spit out these projections, and we can really make sense of the world on a much more precise scale that I feel like we can start to solve a lot of these problems. But the power needs to be in the right place, and the capital needs to be in the right place, and that's sort of where things are going to get a little hairy, because people are going to cling on to the power that they have, and they're going to do everything that they can to stop it.
Yep.
Like, corporations will spend millions of dollars to not pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the money. And so, yeah, and you have to be very careful when a lawsuit sets precedent, right? Yeah. So that's the sort of like where I'm getting at, and I feel like that if AI can disrupt in the right areas, it can tip the balance a little bit. And yeah, there are aspects of that where like there are forces that are trying to obscure stuff and obfuscate, and there's a lot of like especially in the legal industry, I feel like that their goal is to make sure that they're the ones that understand, and they're the ones that have to control this stuff, and it's not for the layman. Well, every layman now has a PhD student in their pocket, right? And that's where I think the advantage of it is, right? That if now intelligence is completely ubiquitous and any person can like literally have a psychologist, a physicist, an economist, a politician, a lawyer in their pocket at all times, that is completely attentive, has perfect recall, and can help you through any situation, that tips the balance of power back to the people in a way. And that's where we can now start to sort of start reeling back in these mega corporations that are tipping policy in a way that helps them. And I feel like we can start getting back to a legal system and a political system that is about allowing people to prosper, because we actually will be better off if everyone has what they need, and they can focus on their specialization, and they can focus on the thing that they're good at, and we can all profit from it.
Sounds like good words, my friend.
that's where I'm at for sure. I feel like that's a thing. And if a few industries need to die along the way, then toughen up, princess.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's the Times 11, man. I reckon it's a pretty good podcast.
Yeah, I think that was I must say myself, that was a pretty good end note.
yeah, well done.
Awesome. I think that was fun. I mean, that's 2 hours and 45. There was a little bit of errors and stuff in the middle there. It's probably more like 220 maybe, but that's pretty good. That was fun. Nobody tuned in really, but that's all well and good. It's all on record. It was fun to do. Wasn't doing it for other people to watch in, right? Like, it's just an excuse to catch up. So that was super fun.
Yeah.
We didn't talk.
I like it, man.
We didn't talk about as much things as I thought we did. We went off the rails, but there's always next time.
We've got too much to talk about, and I think
that is true.
Does require quite a few sessions. So.
Yeah. So naming the podcast has just gotten even harder.
Yeah. Let's just use AI to come up with it.
That is true. I'll ask Claude, because ChatGPT is so bad at naming things. It's horrible. Awesome, dude. I'll let you get back to your family.
Please, man. You have a good night, all right?
You too, man. Cheers. Well, that was cute. We had a good time there. That was fun. Yeah. So we've got a lot of credits for Suno AI this month, so I'm definitely gonna have to do another Suno music AI stream. Maybe we'll make some more music for my game. And yeah, I've got a live stream tomorrow, so I gotta stop as well and get ready for that. But yeah, I reckon I'll have a fair bit of time to do some work on stream next week. Get a lot of stuff done. Sounds like good plan to me. So it looks like probably Mondays and Thursdays are going to be the main days that I'll be able to do this. And yeah, I'll see you then.